Okay, 2020, huh? Fuck this year. This year sucks. Okay, next year's probably gonna, or this year rather. I guess it's the 4th and I'm recording this. It's probably gonna suck. A lot of things are gonna keep sucking for the foreseeable future. Games kinda suck too, so let's talk about them. This video is actually kind of loose. I had a bunch of little topics I wanted to make separate videos on, but none of them felt interesting enough to warrant an entire video dedicated to them. But I realized that I could cover all of them in this fashion because they all relate to one or two different games that I have on my list. So this is about every game I wanted to talk about for one reason or another, plus some game design and creative writing, I guess, concepts I wanted to explain or otherwise came to myself. Now, I want to get this disclaimer out of the way right now. As per usual, the same thing I said in my Dark Souls 3 video, and it seemed to work out pretty well, so I'll say it again. Everything I say here is my own opinion. I talk about these things from the intention of giving people ideas, not changing their minds or telling people what to think or that they're wrong or anything. If you disagree with something I say, feel free to ask me about it. Present your argument. I'm very open to changing my own perspective. I change my mind all the time. Many of the things we're going to talk about in this video are stuff that I've changed my mind on at least multiple times in the past year. And if I see a compelling argument I haven't already considered, I usually go out of my way to, try to see its merits. I only make these videos so that I can learn, I can hopefully inspire someone else to think in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise. That's pretty much it. So yeah, my opinions, just talk about it. If you have something to say, go ahead and ask me. I'm free to talk to anyone, pretty much. This disclaimer is especially important in this video because holy shit, 2020 was the year of me not being able to relate to the general public in the slightest. I understand why people have the opinions that they have for the most part on all of these, but I hated most of the things that people liked this year. I liked quite a few things that people hated this year. And yeah, I just felt like I was surrounded by aliens the entire time, and it's just like everyone started liking dog shit, like just funneling dog shit into their mouths, just praising the mundane, just acting like incredibly generic, repetitive stuff with some groundbreaking fucking masterpiece. Most of the year I spent not being able to find a single person online who actually would see things the way that I did for a number of these topics. And, spoilers for literally fucking everything, by the way. Alrighty, I have 5 games that I have issues with or otherwise disappointed me or otherwise I wanted to talk about in a somewhat negative light, and 5 games that I actually liked. Like I said, the dislikes aren't really about recommendations per se or quality. Obviously, like say, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a much better game than like Fast and Furious Crossroads or the new Watch Dogs or anything like that, but FF7R actually bothered me, whereas Crossroads is just some shitty game that nobody likes, so who cares? And I played so many games this year. I must be jaded as fuck because I did not enjoy myself with hardly anything that I played. Every game I played either bored me immediately, bored me as it went on to the point of me not wanting to finish it, or was just otherwise, like, fine, acceptable, mediocre, maybe. That's exactly what I want to start this discussion off with. Let's talk about something that is not bad, but I did not enjoy. So let's talk about Hades. Hades is the main outlier here. It's not a bad game. It's actually very good, very well made. I have very few solid criticisms of it, but I still wanted to talk about it, so I put it in my, 5 least favorites games of 2020 category. Of my tiny list of criticisms, I don't like the particle effects in this game. This actually goes for quite a few modern games. I had the same issue with Ori, Will of the Wisps Ori, which I played about a week ago. Games go so apeshit with particle effects and hit effects when you're doing things or attacking enemies that all of the visual elements end up completely covering up the action and making it impossible to see the enemies that you're swinging at. In this game, like say, the Dionysus Call, the Greater Call, that is, spawns these obnoxious purple splashes that cover everything, just swinging point blank at any small-sized enemies, like especially the Knights in Elysium, makes it so I can't even see what their animations are or what they're doing, Are they in hit stun? Are they performing an armor move? Even if they're not an armor enemy, some enemies still have moves that engage as though they're armor and that hit stun doesn't interrupt them. Will I be safe to continue hitting them, or will they bust out? Which direction are they even facing? Are they facing me? Am I hitting their backside? Will I be safe to continue hitting them? I constantly have to back off while fighting enemies just to see what the fuck is happening, just to look at their character model and see what they're doing and make sure I won't fuck up and take a hit that I could have avoided, just because I can't see anything going on. Beyond that, I dislike it when enemies are attacking you from off-screen. Excuse me. Some of the enemies, especially in Asphodel, are extremely mobile and move around the stage a lot, either by burrowing underground or leaping all over the place, often going off-screen. But say like a fast bomb projectile might come zipping at you from off-screen with no warning. When fighting the Minotaur boss, he can lunge at you from all the way off-screen too. If you're just like minding your own business, not knowing how close the enemies are, you could be at one corner and you can't see either of the enemies. You don't know if they're at the other end. If you start walking over, are they just going to come like blitzing at you with an attack that you won't be able to see coming? Several of the hitboxes in the game are pretty whack. Again, Minotaur probably has the worst of this. His axe lunge hits like a mile further than the actual visible animation of his swing. Some of the spear attacks reach way further than they're animated too. Some of the projectiles have wonk hitboxes. However, those last two problems, at least in the heroes fight, can be mitigated by changing the way you fight. I decided to just, stay on top of the Minotaur the entire time until he dies, so that he never actually goes off screen, and you're at least given warning when the other hero is going to throw a spear at you. But then again, you have other Elysium warriors that there's the indicator that appears above your head that tells you when a bow enemy is locked onto you, but it doesn't tell you when he's actually aiming at you. See, that's the thing. One, there can be multiple bow enemies in the area, and you just get one indicator above your head, so you don't fucking know which one of the enemies is aiming at you currently and how close they are to attacking you, and you like the projectile. It's really obnoxious. But the other thing about that is that you can have the blinking light above your head that indicates that a bow enemy in the Elysium Fields is going to attack you for a long period of time. Like if you're not close enough, or if maybe I think if there's a wall obstructing you, I didn't test it enough to confirm which one it was, but if you're not close enough for the enemy with the bow to actually take aim at you, the reticle thing will still appear above your head, like continually blinking, as though it's going to give you the timing of when the arrow is going to come whizzing at you, but it's a lie. It's not even accurate anymore, because the enemy won't actually shoot at you until they can see you again, until they're close enough to see you again. So you just have the indicator above your head giving you no fucking information, and you might just mosey on and just barely have the enemy with the bow come back on screen, and he's already ready to take the shot, because the indicator that's supposed to blink, 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 and then tell you when the arrow's coming is just fucking wrong. Other than that, just going back to like the animations and the hit effects covering up the animations and the models, a lot of the animations and models are not very pronounced in the first place, and don't have a lot of warning to their attacks. Like the larts, the big fat guys, they have a clear animation. They lean back and then they lunge at you, right? That's perfectly fine. You can see it clearly. It is very clear, even at a glance. Even if you're there's multiple enemies that you need to be keeping track of, your eye will pick up the information that they're leaning back, because it's a very clear, pronounced animation, and it tells you that they're going to swing at you. That's fine. But then you have these other fucking enemies some enemies you just have to assume when they're going to attack, like the floating hands in Tartarus. If they get right next to you, there's not really a startup animation on their grab attack. They just kind of grab at you when they get near enough to you, but they won't do it all the time. Sometimes you might assume that they're going to when you get close enough, and then you dodge past them to dodge the attack and then start hitting him in the back. But he didn't actually trigger the attack. He just decided not to do that, or maybe he got knocked out of it by some form of hit stun or something. So he'll just turn around and, again, without a real animation, without warning, he'll just attack again. Other than that, I don't like the structure of the game's objectives. The game totally works up until you beat your first run, which for me was, I think, around 9 hours in. After that, I think it kind of loses all agency in playing the game, you know? I could just keep beating runs just to reach the end and, I guess, progress the story to an unknown point. I don't know how many more runs I'll have to do until I get some arbitrary ending. But is that the only driving force? You know, I'm not really motivated to collect more darkness or any of the other resources to power up, because I already beat the run, and every run I do after that point just gets easier and easier and easier as I get better and better at each part of the run. Beating runs to progress the story just becomes a chore, honestly. It's no longer pushing you to improve or beat some sort of challenge. The rest of the story can be obtained without any effort, just pure time sink of, you know, beating more and more runs. After the first run I beat, which was, around like 8 or 9 runs in, I think I only failed one run attempt from that point on, much later. That's because I tried using the hidden spear aspect that nerfs your health all the way down to 30% total, and even then, I died quite literally one hit away from beating Hades. So if getting to the ending of the story doesn't have some real other obstacle, you know, to overcome other than just doing more runs and sinking more time into it, I don't really care about the rewards I'm getting, because I don't have a clear goal in mind that I need to get stronger for in order to beat, you know? So at that point, the progression had kind of lost me. I was just doing runs just for the sake of doing runs, to progress the story that I don't care about. At that point, the only real motivating factor would be if you cared so much about the story that you would just beat more easy runs to see it, or try to get all the Skelly statues for beating the game on certain levels of heat. I got the second Skelly statue. I haven't gotten the final statue one. It's probably the only one that even has a chance of requiring me to put some sort of effort in, because you know, jumping up to 8 heat was a cakewalk, jumping up to 16 heat was still a cakewalk. 32 heat has been kicking my ass, but I'll talk about that in a second. If I just had a more clearly defined goal, or something to feel that I still wanted to get stronger for, then I'd have motivation to keep doing runs with new heat and get the rewards with each weapon. But, you know, then again, the only actual challenge that's left is to apply more heat, and some of the heat, especially if I'm up to 32 heat, I kind of have to start using the heats that remove some of your mirror talents, which removes the point of even collecting more darkness to level up talents. Why would I level up talents? I can't even use them because the packs of punishment take away that resource. It also really bothers me that you don't just collect all the rewards for every previous level of heat when you beat a run. Like, to have footage for this video, I jumped to 16 heat with the shield. Even though I've already beaten it on 16 heat, it didn't give me the fucking rewards for beating it on, like, 2 heat or 3 heat with the shield. Seriously? Taking the shield and doing 2 heat would be a joke at this point, an actual mindless time sink, just a fucking half hour of turning my brain off, right? I already beat it at 16. Can't you just reward me with the lower heat stuff instead of locking upgrade materials and other shit behind pure fucking time sinking? Other complaints. I don't like how some of the boons, especially the Daedalus Hammer ones, are really unbalanced. I mean, I wouldn't be bothered by this if you didn't get hammer upgrades that actively make your weapon significantly worse. Like the one for the sword that makes it so you can't control your special attack. It lunges forwards a distance that you don't want it to. But I guess there are, you know, that sort of thing comes with the nature of a roguelike. Sometimes you get really good stuff, and sometimes you just get garbage. So, those are my only criticisms, and they aren't very significant. The game is very good overall. Most people know that already. No, what I really wanted to talk about with Hades is something that I've been feeling all year with a lot of games, with older games too, as in games that I played this year but that didn't come out in 2020. It may just be the jaded cynicism, at play, but the real reason that I put Hades here, and I don't feel the same way towards Hades that most people seem to, is not because I have some, clever, intelligent, super secret observation or hidden knowledge, or that my years of studying writing or game design has given me this this observation that other people might be glossing over. No. I already explained my very small list of minor gripes. No, it simply comes down to I just don't enjoy the game as much as other people do. The act of playing the game, to me, is not fun. It's not bad. It's not a negative experience. Like I said, there's very little wrong with it. This isn't about the game being bad. This is about me... This is pretty much about just me being different from everyone else. My brain just working differently. When you break it down, this game 100% hinges on how fun the gameplay is. Even if you love the story and you are hooked on every part somehow, even though, the story takes 20 hours to express what I could just tell you in 3 fucking sentences, and mostly consists of characters repeating themselves and saying nothing in particular or stating the obvious. But no, even if you loved the story, you'd still have to play the game to go through run after run after run. The RPG mechanics and constant reward and improvement also hinges on doing runs. You will have to spend blocks of uninterrupted time playing the gameplay no matter what, so you better fucking enjoy it. And unlike most games I played this year, I wasn't bored playing Hades. I was occasionally annoyed by just minor gripes or salts, but nothing pervasive that would poison my overall experience. What I experienced was an entertainment ceiling, essentially. At its best, playing Hades has you doing fast action stuff, attacking, using a variety of skills, sometimes altering your playstyle in slight ways to match your current buffs. Usually only through the Daedalus Hammer, actually impacts how you play moment to moment. And then just, dodging or otherwise getting out of the way of attacks or blocking them with the shield. Which I don't think I ever did before I started writing the script. I didn't even know that shield could be used to block until I was mostly done with the game. I'd already gotten the second Skelly statue. I wasn't really very motivated to get the third. And I saw other people playing and using the shield to block. So, anyways, point is, at its best, you're going ham, you're doing your thing, you're attacking a bunch, however the fuck you like, you're zipping around, you're making fast-paced decisions, like crowd controlling or applying debuffs or taking advantage of walls and traps with knockback, and just hitting things and dodging when you see danger. So that is the game's neutral state. The game can only really become less fun than that. Like when you get hit by some dumbass hitbox that makes no visual sense, which doesn't happen very often, but it does sometimes, especially if you're trying to take it more seriously. So, if you aren't having fun in that neutral state, doing all the action shit and not making any mistakes, then it stands to reason that you're hitting an entertainment ceiling. No matter what you do, the game won't become more fun than that. That's not true. Okay, I enjoyed this game while I was still learning it and improving it until I beat the first run, because I didn't know what the fuck was going to come next. I got a little twinge of genuine satisfaction from beating 16 Heat, but that's literally it. I personally just don't enjoy fast action games, stuff like this. I've never enjoyed playing Bayonetta or Metal Gear Rising, stuff like that. You make so many decisions in such a short period of time that I'm just going on autopilot. The decisions you're making are fundamentally simplistic. My brain is just telling my hands what to do at every instance. Even the most complex strategies that you can employ in this game are decisions that my brain makes quickly and without any real thought. It mostly just feels like turning my brain off, letting it hit the bad guys, and when my eyeballs see a danger thing, get out of the way. That's it. My brain is engaged because it's receiving constant stimulation, so I'm not bored. It's Skinner box psychology, but I'm also not excited. I can play these games in my sleep. That's pretty much what happens, if I'm being honest. My brain, making my brain go on fast, combat autopilot, like in these sorts of games, feels literally no different to me than farming for XP or resources in an RPG, like just repeating the same instances over and over, either turn-based or like Dark Souls kind of farming. I just kind of turn my brain off and go through the motions. I can farm the same route or area of an RPG for a long time without getting bored, because my brain isn't that active, so I'm not being made to think about the time that's passing or focus on my sense of boredom. But I'm also not really having fun, per se. I'm sure most of you can relate to that. Even just making the combat more nuanced with elements of space control and positioning would go a long way in making the decisions I'm making feel a lot more complex and engaging. But as it stands, it feels like a bunch of tiny, simplistic decisions or actions done in just very rapid succession. Taking one simple decision that doesn't really excite me or interest me and multiplying it by like 100 in the span of a minute doesn't make any of those decisions feel any more exciting to me. Even turning my brain off, barely paying attention or focusing, I'm constantly surprised by how much it can handle, and it never feels fun. Simple things happening quickly just isn't fun to me. Speed has never had an impact on how much I enjoy combat. So that's my explanation, or my assumption of my explanation, for why I seem to not enjoy Hades. I don't dislike it, but I barely had any fun with it the entire time I was playing. It mostly just felt like going through the motions, clocking in, doing the gameplay thing it expected of me. Doom was the same way this year, a bunch of other stuff, but to be fair, I haven't played Doom on Nightmare yet, so that would at least give me... It might give the combat some sort of a tension, if it's hard enough to make me actually focus, which could make the action feel a little more exciting. Now see, even if I pump up the heat even more, and eventually find a level of heat that isn't like crazy overtuned like 50 heat is, although I'm sure 50 heat is still doable if you have a strong run, but even if I increase the heat until it's actually a challenge, for Hades, I don't think the game feels any different. See, when something is an actual challenge and you only win by a hair and, you have to constantly make sure to not make any slight mistakes, there's tension. Tension is what makes the game exciting, because most of the time I feel no tension whatsoever. I could just be doing what the game expects of me with its mechanics, and that's it. Doom on the hardest difficulty just sounds more likely to have a feeling of tension while you're playing, because it'll be individual firefights that you either win or lose, especially since when you increase the difficulty on Hades, it becomes less skill-based and more RNG-based, which I definitely dislike. I tried a few attempts on 32 heat, and it was not fun. Most of them ended in Asphodel or Elysium. One of them, I think my fourth run, ended on Hades, which was very frustrating since I was close and could have killed him and just fucking been done with the game forever. So anyways, yeah, most of them failed against some onslaught of like armored, mobile enemies that I can't contend with. I didn't have the toolkit to contend with, or situations where I'm getting attacked so frequently, but I only have the one dodge because my double dodge is removed by the packs of punishment that I've selected, and or just getting hit by attacks that I'm not even sure what I got hit by because there's so much like particle effect bullshit on screen. The animations are too small. They're covered up by hit effects all the time. Even if I play the long game and turn off the speedrun pact of punishment, I'll still be forced into situations where I either had no chance to avoid some collection of attacks all at once, or the screen was like a fucking clusterfuck of enemy animations that are so underpronounced you can't even see what the fuck I'm even being hit by. Or most of the time, I just don't have the boons to net the damage output that I need to win relative to the situations that are likely to unfold over time. None of my 32 heat attempts had any tension or excitement either, even the one that got all the way to Hades, because anything that was kicking my ass was doing so because there didn't seem like anything I could fucking do about it. Like a room, or I did what I was expected to do, and I'm not entirely sure what happened or why it didn't work. Like a room filled with more projectiles than open space for a minute on end, or like 5 or 6 armored bomb guys hopping around in a small area, and explosions and so much bullshit on screen, whilst the actual bombs themselves don't even glow or have any eye-catching qualities, visual effects. They're just like little beige circles, and making it borderline impossible to see all of the attacks coming all at once, and their timings as well, or just being, the normal game, but my damage output being so low that eventually I'll be put in enough situations where there's no escape, or like the dodge controls, even if I have an extra dodge, like I get a Hermes buff that gives me extra dodges, Zagreus doesn't dodge when I input the dodge with dodges remaining because, say, I took slightly too long after inputting the first dodge to input the second dodge because I wanted to match my timing to the actual attack that was coming out, but it doesn't let you delay your secondary dodge. There's a window of time where you can do a double dodge, but if you don't do a double dodge fast enough, it'll put your regular dodge into normal recovery that you can't cancel into your second dodge even if you haven't used it yet, which is incredibly obnoxious. There was never a feeling of, like, get good, like any of the Souls games or anything like that. There's anything that did a lot of damage to me or killed me never left me thinking, I see something that I could have done differently. Yeah, I definitely, I'll do better next time because I'll work out a better strategy. No, it just seems like bullshit. Maybe it just needs to be the right mix of, like, the correct packs of punishment or the right RNG, but I have not found a way to actually enjoy playing this game. With that, I want to go on a weird tangent here. I want to expand this topic a little further with some other sort of media. I've recently been thinking about this concept, this sort of quantity over quality, if you will, as it's opened my eyes to a secret of some media's popularity and appeal. The best examples I have for this aren't 2020 games at all, so I'll swing back around to this, but I did want to talk about this topic in this video. So take Train to Busan, Angel Beats, Clannad, and a few other series or movies like that, but those are the things that come to the top of my head when I think of this kind of concept. Train to Busan is intensely popular amongst a lot of the audience that enjoys it and appreciates it. And when I finally got around to watching it, because of all the glowing praise I heard, I could not for the life of me understand why it was so intensely beloved. It's this thing where I understand that sometimes everyday people might not see the appeal of, shall I say, higher concept media. I don't expect most people to sit down and love American Movie. It's the kind of film that only fucking egghead retard assholes like me enjoy. The film is not exciting, it's not action-packed, it's not really emotional. It doesn't have any of the appeals that most people would probably go to the movies for. It's for weirdos who are tired of the things that people are usually content with and just want other shit. It's incredibly interesting in ways that you'll only appreciate if you're inclined to think critically and philosophically about the films that you watch, But if you're not used to approaching film in that sense and appreciating those elements, you won't get it. You won't enjoy it. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also the element of, say, some normal-ass person, some normal dude watches The Notebook and gets really emotional at it and loves it. Or I haven't seen it personally, but someone like me has seen so many fucking movies and stories and the same played out emotional struggles and dramatic events, I've been desensitized to most emotion in media. A simple, endearing message isn't going to have any impact on me. I'm just going to see it as tired and generic most of the time. Something I've already gotten sick of seeing because it's so unoriginal and common. But even disregarding that concept, say you have a film that's slightly emotionally resonant, like Incredibles 2, I guess. Then take a film that's a bit more emotionally powerful, like, say, Coco. Generally speaking, from people who actually feel emotions in films, that's the sense that I've gotten from them. You'd expect people to react positively and emotionally to the weaker one, but react even more strongly and positively to the stronger one, right? It's not a matter of whether or not the everyday person will understand the appeal of each film. They're both very easy to consume. So, the better one and the more powerful one is the one that most people tend to resonate more strongly with, right? That makes perfect sense to me. Like, even if both of them are stronger and more positive reactions than I would have personally, because I don't give a fuck, they still end up resonating more with the one that even critical people like me would agree is stronger and better. You expect it to work like that on that linear scale, but sometimes, in weird, creepy instances, it just doesn't. Now, hopefully you've all seen it, so let's take Train to Busan, for example. It's not a bad film. I enjoyed it. But in my opinion, it's pretty passable. its most unique element, in my opinion, is how overly dramatic and campy it is. I actually think this works in its favor for what it's going for, in a similar way to like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. It's very cliched, standard zombie modem. You know, here's the zombies, here's some clearly defined, simple characters. We've got the big, tough, abrasive guy who's actually like sweet and heroic. We've got the uncharismatic, unmotivated, quiet teenager who's inspired to do his best and be the hero when the danger comes. We've got this selfish businessman adapting for the need to cooperation, letting go of the aspects of his life that informed his selfishness, so on. Pretty tired character traits. The characters are all people you've seen like a million times before in other media. Archetypal personalities. They aren't dislikable, but they aren't anything special. And the movie, even beyond that, is just extremely cliched, everything about it. But it doesn't suffer from the usual flaws of being unoriginal and generic because it moves so quickly. You know, it basically says, you know, you've seen a character that's exactly like this before. Here's a very clear scene that makes it incredibly obvious what his personality is. Now you understand what cliche we're working with. Let's move on. So the fact that it is so unsubtle in its presentation makes it so that they don't have to linger and waste time pretending like some cliched zombie trope or character trope is some unique idea that they need to, you know, sanctify or explain. But at the end of the day, the movie is still just a collection of tropes you've seen before in a campy, hokey, overdramatic presentation. Usually I say overdramatic as an insult, but in this case it makes perfect sense for what they're going for. It never wastes my time or pretends like I'm invested, it just shoots through trope after trope, scene after scene, you know? But I still don't think any particular part of this film is that special. I think it's just kinda entertaining, fairly entertaining. You know, watch if you've got nothing better to do. It really is just a generic, cliched zombie plot with generic, cliched characters, generic, cliched plot events happening that you've definitely seen before in plenty of other zombie fiction. That's why it confused me so much as to why the people who praised it all seemed to act like this was some fucking life-changing godsend of a film. Referencing back to the scale from before, I'd say that emotionally speaking, Train to Busan is less developed and less hard-hitting than, say, something like Coco. I think Coco is more sophisticated and develops its emotional beats more thoroughly. Maybe they're on a similar level in my eyes. I don't really care, they're pretty close to each other. So, if most ordinary people would say, yeah, Coco is pretty good, you know, I'd expect them to have a relatively similar viewpoint on Train to Busan, but they don't. And I finally figured it out, kind of. It's quantity over quality. Like I was saying, there's a certain threshold of emotional investment for storytelling that each person has, and it can fluctuate, you know. Take someone like myself. I experience almost zero emotions from consuming any media by this point. I literally can't remember a time when I would have, you know, the feels, as the millennials say. I can still tell that the Chimera Ant arc of Hunter x Hunter has a bigger emotional impact than, say, something like some similar arc in My Hero Academia, right? Even if both have no impact on me, they make me feel essentially nothing at all. I can still tell that one is stronger than the other. But even someone as cold and dead as myself still has the very rare occasion where I get emotionally invested in something. I never got so invested that I stopped looking at everything as a story that was written by a human for a particular purpose. I always see everything that is constructed as art, but I still sometimes find something so provocative, or at least resonant with myself, that I have an emotional reaction. Last time that happened for me was with BoJack Horseman, quite a while ago. So, in other words, I have a very high threshold. Something has to be really that fucking good and intricate and profound to make me actually give a shit. Most of the time, emotional reaction isn't even something I factor in when appraising something's quality, in my opinions, since hardly anything has that effect on me at all. However, if you take someone with a lower threshold, a much lower threshold, someone who will get invested easily and quickly, you know, someone who, like, starts tearing up at Disney movies or Game of Thrones character deaths or anything like that, they'll actually have an emotional reaction to, say, Train to Busan. my brain naturally assumes that emotional investment is on a linear graph. Less powerful stuff is, less impactful and people care less. More powerful stuff is more impactful and people will care more. That is not the case. It's more of a logarithmic curve. In reality, if someone has such a low threshold for investment that they get emotionally invested in the characters and dramatic events of Train to Busan, even if they're really simplistic, cliched dramatic events and characters, then they're already hooked, Then they become a plaything of the film to do whatever the fuck it likes. And after that, all it takes is just adding on to that. More characters to get invested in. They don't have to be more complicated. There's no more emotional substance behind the new characters. Just add more things of roughly the same amount of quality or depth. Okay? More dramatic events. More shit happening to more of the characters. And when the more dramatic shit happens, maximize the presentation of the drama, maximize the sadness, maximize the anger, maximize the fucking sappy background music, maximize everything, just present it in as the most fucking dramatic thing to ever happen in history. The thing about it is, to someone like me, having one character I don't give a shit about makes me not give a shit. Adding 5 more characters that I equally don't give a shit about doesn't suddenly multiply my experience. My opinion is still the same. No actual dramatic point in the story is enough to make me have any emotion, so I don't. It doesn't matter how many times they multiply or add in things that are of roughly the same quality. But for people with lower thresholds that are able to get invested in something that is not that investable, it's multiplicative. One thing that even just barely passes their standard for drama and what they need to get emotionally invested in something, even if it's not that deep or impactful by itself, you could just do it over and over and over and over again, add a ton of different things that are all, aren't that powerful by themselves, but are roughly the same degree of depth or nuance. And by the end of it, the person with the low threshold has compounded their emotional reactions to all of those drama batteries and walks away feeling this massive emotional reaction, even though the film is just a collection of a bunch of shit that's only slightly impactful, all crammed together and fired away in rapid succession, whilst being presented in a more dramatic fashion than it probably warrants. This phenomenon of quantity over quality has finally explained to me why people seem to sometimes seemingly randomly select shows or movies to overpraise in a non-linear fashion, as if they're somehow so emotional despite them being so simplistic in my eyes. I almost wonder if such a thing could work on me, as in, being multiplicative, but I doubt it's even possible that I'll ever find out. I have an emotional reaction to something in media maybe once every 2 years? I don't think it's possible for something that crams a bunch of separated dramatic events to even have anything that surpasses my threshold, let alone multiple things that surpass my threshold. To bring this concept back to 2020 games, I think this is why some people like 13 Sentinels. 13 Sentinels is a game almost no one has played, but its small fanbase is incredibly ravenous in their praise for the game. I have no idea how toxic the fanbase is because I've never seen a fan of the game ever be told by anyone that they don't think the game is very good. Like, the Nioh community is fucking toxic, right? If you even utter that the game isn't literal perfection, they plug their ears and start shouting at the top of their voice and throwing things at you. I hope the 13 Sentinels fanbase isn't like that, because 13 Sentinels was the worst game I played in 2020. I didn't think anything could bother me more than FF7R, but maybe due to mellowing out on FF7R just out of time passing and not caring so much about it, especially people not talking about it anymore, I had room in my heart for a greater and stronger hatred. Now, to be 100% fair, I didn't finish every game I played this year. I played a shitload of games in 2020, and a lot of them bored me either immediately or somewhere along the way, so I dropped quite a few of them. Maybe if I had forced myself to finish some of those other games, the boredom and maybe other factors, the bad game design factors, would have made the experience so miserable to endure that this list would look somewhat different. But no, I forced myself to play 13 Sentinels, despite being miserable while playing it, and I was tricked into getting this game because the people in the small community that it has made such a fuss about how amazing it was, and I saw nothing to the contrary, that I ended up thinking, damn, literally everyone who talks about this seems like they would sell their firstborn child for it. It's probably at least pretty good. And now I'm the fool again for trusting fucking strangers on the internet to somehow, have the same views of writing and game design that I have after years of studying education on writing and game design and other subjects. Pro tip, always get your recommendations from someone that you actually trust to know what the fuck they're talking about. Now, in all honesty, a large portion of my frustration with FF7R this year came from the people and the community surrounding it. And other than being salty at getting duped into playing this game and pushing myself to finish 13 Sentinels just because I had heard good things about it, I have no issue with the 13 Sentinels community. From what I've seen, they're kind of underdogs anyway. The game sold like shit. It wasn't promoted at all by Sony, and even though I fucking hated it, I think a lot of people might really enjoy it if they played it. So I guess it's a shame that the community got shafted in this way, and the game got shafted in this way. But you're here to listen to me bitch and moan about things, so let's get to the fun part. I went into this game with overly high expectations. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who lets expectations or disappointment cloud his judgment. I'm just saying that early on, there were warning signs that the game was written like hot dog shit, but I cast doubt on the obvious red flags because I'd heard so much praise for the game. Okay, say an incredible, unoriginal, and tired, shitty anime trope cliche fucking garbage thing happens, and I thought to myself, man, this is incredibly generic and tropey. That's just a copy and paste of a shitty trope. But this game is good, right? So clearly that must mean that this scene is supposed to come off as tropey and make it really obvious that it's ham-fisted, because it's going to do some sort of clever deconstruction that will recontextualize this trope and add depth to the narrative, right? And to be fair, that's not a crazy thought to have in my defense. That's exactly what Steins Gate is. Steins Gate is anime tropes and cliches very obviously getting forced into the narrative in order to make some sort of clever commentary on the nature of the trope or the genre convention surrounding it or the culture of the otaku, and recontextualizing the trope in order to make something original. First, placing the trope into a heightened reality where it ceases to function, and, coming up with a way to creatively explain, the trope's existence in a way that justifies it within the heightened reality. Breaking down the rational disconnect of the trope and making, a character or plot point out of said reconstruction. 13 Sentinels, however, is just a game of tropes. That's it. Sure. Some of the tropes are very obvious and front-facing, okay? But that doesn't change the fact that they're just tired, shitty tropes. If I tell a shitty joke and then tell people that it was a shitty joke, it doesn't make the joke stop being shitty. You see what I mean? Okay, take this scene, for example.
毎晩変な夢のせいで深刻な寝不足だわ。遅刻。あいただ。
おい、大丈夫か？どこも怪我はないようだな。ちゃんと前を見てないと危ないぜ。
すみません。おや、
君はい
けない、朝礼始まっちゃう。
Tired as fuck trope that was unoriginal literally fucking decades ago. It's very obvious in that it's like 3 tropes all at once. Running with Toast late for school, trips into guy, bounces in such a way that skirt hikes up and then she gets embarrassed about it, and then she falls in love with the boy that she tripped into at first sight, okay? This is so tropey in such a short period of time. It seems like they clearly want you to recognize that it's tropey, right? They're basically tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, look at this trope you've seen before. But it doesn't do anything with that. There's no hidden purpose to this scene, no special explanation as to why this happened. Like, in Steins Gate, Okabe acts as the trope of the Chunibyo, because he's supposed to be very obviously embody that trope. But then they go against the trope to make him a real fucking person. They justify his bizarre trope-esque behavior by creating this weird, unique backstory and characterization that's, unique to Okabe that other Chunibyo characters in anime and otaku culture don't have, which serves to retroactively contextualize why he's acted that way the entire time. That doesn't happen here. There's no secret hidden characterization that explains why this happened. There's no secret, the world they reside in is actually impacted in such a way that it reconstructs itself to match human thoughts or popular media, like in Persona 2. That was my original theory. Since Juro also in the intro, Juro also implies that reality is matching up with the movies he's seen. He says that Fuyusaka looks like an actress within a movie or something. They talk about E.T. before some E.T. bullshit happens. They reference War of the Worlds. In Persona 2, if a rumor becomes widely believed by enough people, reality will shift to make that rumor the truth. Okay, that was part of the plot of Persona 2. So that's what I figured this stupid fucking toast scene was there for. I figured there was some bizarre reality-bending reason like that, that maybe the reason such a brain-dead ass fucking trope happened was because it's supposed to seem like this dumb, boring, fucking tired trope would be revealed to be a clue into understanding that reality shifts to match fiction and match up with tropes. Or something. I don't fucking know. Another possibility is that the trope is being employed as a visual shorthand to express a large degree of important information or characterization. Take the opening to K-On! Season 1, for example. The first episode, when Yui is leaving the house with the toast in the mouth, being late to school. Obviously, K-On! Is older, so the trope wasn't as insanely tired back then. But the point is that, to utilize the audience's understanding of tropes in order to communicate a lot of information without explicit exposition dumps, This informs us of the core characteristics of Yui, her defining personality traits. We understand what kind of person Yui is through the use of this trope, which serves as the backbone to understand where she starts the narrative from, why she makes the decisions that she makes within the narrative, and what to compare her to when she's growing as a character. In addition to making some contradictions to the original formula of the trope. For example, Yui being such, a space case that she, in fact, was not late in the first place and had only misread the clock. But anyways, the point is, in this scene, it serves no purpose other than to just say that Fuyusaka's in love with A, but 1, that's fucking stupid. 2, in terms of subtext, it's worthless. It would only serve to either tell us her personality is that the sort that would lend her to being late to school and unorganized, which are not traits that have any significance to the story and are only really maintained in the occasional scene where she's sleeping in class, but that isn't part of her characterization. It's not even consistent with that. She's sleeping in class because she's unusually tired, which we're told explicitly, but we never actually see what is normal for the character, quote-unquote. We're just told that it's abnormal that she's sleeping this much. And we're told that she's, not usually this tired because of the fucking dream memory bullshit going on. So, this trope scene of the toast tells us nothing important about the character, nothing that matters to the story. Does it matter that Fuyusaka is a sort of person that would fall in love in the blink of an eye? Not really. In fact, literally every character in the fucking story falls in love in the blink of an eye, as far as we're fucking made aware. characters don't connect or develop relationships to relate to one another in a meaningful way over time. We're simply just told that one character is in love, quote-unquote, with another character. Sometimes it's more acceptably believable than others, but then, like, the long-haired glasses girl just falls in love with Juro off-screen for no given reason. We're just fucking told this outright. We have no reason to believe it. We just have to accept it at face value. So at the end of the day, that toast scene, it was simply put there because I guess Kamitami thought it would be a real fucking hilarious-ass knee slapper if that anime trope of the girl with the fucking toast in her mouth happened. This is the reality of most of the story. Almost everything that happens in the story is a tired anime trope you've probably seen 100 fucking times before, if you're even slightly prolific at watching anime or reading manga. The tropes aren't clever parodies or deconstructions. Even with the tropes that are very obvious in their inclusion, they only exist just exactly as the trope they appear to be. They're just tired, copy and pasted tropes by a hack writer. So that's the tropes, and frankly, most of the ideas in this story boil down to, oh, it's that trope I've seen a million times before. Cool. Yeah, really fucking interesting, really creative stuff you got going there. From the sci-fi elements to most of the twists, this is how it is. I'll go ahead and get what I actually like out of the way now. I was enjoying the game for the first couple hours. There were some red flag moments, but other than that, it's pretty enjoyable to start with. And you get immediately hooked into, you know, the what the fucks of the story. I like Okino. I don't hate most of the characters in a similar sense to what I was talking about with Train to Busan. They're all copy and pasted archetypes I've seen countless times before. There's nothing special or interesting about any of them, really. But they aren't offensive, so I don't mind the characters. Okino I actually kind of like. Well, not as a plot device, really. Honestly, thinking about his role as a guy who knows basically everything and can seemingly do whatever the fuck the script feels like letting him do at any moment really bugs me. But his personality is likable, and usually in Japanese media, you know, like flirty gay characters are pretty much played for, you know, gay panic laughs. It was actually kind of refreshing to have a teasing gay character who actually comes across as sexy and cool rather than, like, obscene. I don't like most of the twists near the end. In concept, they're just boring because they're mostly obvious twists that you've also, you know, seen a shitload of times. Like, wow, we're in a virtual world is an explain away for literally fucking anything that could possibly be happening. That's totally original. Where'd you come up with that one? Yeah, never seen that shit before. But I actually did like the twist where Amaguchi drives out to the town, he finds out that he lives in a fucking dome. That was a cool what the fuck moment. Probably the last one there was in the game. I like how some of the twists are, it's actually less sci-fi than it appears. That's the only clever deconstruction I think there is in the whole game of any tropes, you know, that the time travel was bullshit the whole time. All of the rest of the tropes are obvious and tropey. To be fair, the time travel thing is obvious too, but at least it's kind of original. It's questionable whether, like, the android stuff is bullshit, because we're in a VR thing, so maybe the androids only exist in the fake VR world, just like the Deimos, and in fact, in the real world, that technology was never made. I mean, that's possible. We confirm that being able to record human consciousness is a real technology that was made. Nanomachines were made since the disease of the war, or whatever the fuck it was, spread through nanomachines. Clearly, VR has to exist as a technology, long-term space travel, some level of cloning, although it's questionable whether the cloning in the real world works the same way that it does in the VR world. I'll assume that the giant construction equipment that the Deimos constructed themselves as are real technologies that existed in the real world, since it makes sense for them to have that kind of equipment if they're trying to, like, terraform a new home planet. But, like, Ida knows he's in a time loop of some kind, right? So anything Ida does in the scenes in this game, I'm not sure if I should interpret them as things he's doing that never happened in the real world, or if they did. He made androids. Did that happen in the real history? What about the Sentinels? Surely, since, like, Okino made the Sentinels within the VR world, they never actually existed in the real world, right? But whatever, it's not even important anyways. So, I like the time travel, that the time travel was fake the entire time. Then again, it's not a good twist, because you as the player, if you're not actually fucking retarded, you have no reason to believe that there is time travel in the first place up to that point, since accepting how they seem to act like the time travel works brings a whole slew of contradictions that are immediately observable, like the fact that Deimos attacking in the past doesn't change anything in the future, and the fact that when the characters travel, like time travel from one zone to somewhere else, when they come back, they don't come back to the exact moment that they left. They come back to some amount of time, the same amount of time has passed that they've been gone. This is one of the issues I had with the plot structure. I can't really call most of this game's reveals twists, because they aren't. A twist is, like, say, the audience thinks this guy is the killer, and it mostly seems like this guy is the killer. It all fits together well, which is why we suspect that he's the killer in the first place, but then it turns out someone else was. That's a twist. You expect one thing, or otherwise the evidence seems to be pointing to one thing, which adds up mostly, but then something else also adds up even better, okay? In this game, nothing ever actually adds up until you're told explicitly what the deal is. Like, the time traveling thing, you're told, oh, this is time travel. But, like, it obviously isn't in the traditional sense. There are obviously glaring contradictions with accepting what they seem to be wanting you to think. So you spend the entire game thinking, this is bullshit. There are obvious contradictions that this game isn't addressing, the characters aren't noticing or talking about. Are these clues, or are they plot holes? And as the game goes on, eventually you'll get your answer to that question, okay? Sometimes it's a clue, and sometimes it's a plot hole. Now, I've always been pretty good at sniffing out plot holes or inconsistencies. I'm really anal about that kind of thing. It's not that I'm a purist who thinks that minor plot holes ruin a movie or a game or anything like that, but I constantly think about subtext every waking second, which lends me to try to rationalize and think through every single piece of a story next to every other piece of the story to see if it all fits together perfectly. And that is the death nail for this game. There are so many plot holes. It is actually staggering. There's more narrative content to, thinking about every single contradiction in the plot than there is to thinking about what they're claiming the plot to be. When I played through this, sometimes after reading a little bit of dialogue, I'd be pacing around my room for an entire hour, thinking about every single part of the story I'd seen already up to that point, recontextualizing it with the new information, and considering the explicit text and the subtext to see whether or not everything lines up and what doesn't. This is the only game I played this year where I actually threw up while playing it, partially because I was chugging so much soft drink to try to stay awake because the game is so fucking boring, but partially because my mind was overflowing with frustrating inconsistency and lack of logic, and I have a weak stomach under that kind of stress. There are quite literally thousands of contradictions or lapses in logic that I've identified in the plot, but let me just talk about a few big ones. First, I need to explain the difference between a plot hole and a contrivance. For those who don't already know. A plot hole is a genuine inconsistency in the narrative, something that actually can't make sense as the story is currently told. A contrivance, or, when something is contrived, that means that it is incredibly illogical and unrealistic within the unrealism of the fictional setting. It's a cop-out, a cheat, basically. It's not that the plot point couldn't happen per se, but just that it makes no sense for it to happen the way it did, and it only did so because the writer couldn't figure out a more logical way to make the story work. This game is Contrivance City. Let me give you an example of a contrivance and why it's bad. When I think of the word contrivance, my brain immediately goes to a series of video essays Digibro made on Sword Art Online Season 2, where Kirito is in like a VR competition where you get paid by playing the game in your actual bank account or credit card information or something like that. You physically enter it on screens within the game world rather than like through a menu or just on the game's fucking website or something. That would make more sense. This is extremely stupid, right? Why would the game be designed this way? But later, it's revealed that the killer uses a fucking Harry Potter cloak to sneak up on people and read their information that they're entering on the physical computers that they interact with within the fucking virtual reality game to learn where they live so he can go murder them. So the dumbass design that makes no sense in universe was just there because the writer was too much of a hack to think of a more logical way that the killer could fucking kill people through a game, right? He had to make the universe have this stupid thing that doesn't make any sense and is totally unrealistic and irrational for it to be that way in order to make his dumbass plot twist make sense, right? Same with tons of other parts of that season. You know, you can't log out of the game while playing it, even though that's stupid and makes no sense, because they need them to be trapped in the game with a threat. And being able to leave the game would remove the threat entirely. Tons of other contrivances happen, to make a dumb plot be able to happen. That's the idea. Contrivances come from hack writers that just want to put their first bad idea to paper, but it doesn't work. So they warp the world and the events around in ways that aren't rational or natural to the setting, just to allow the shitty story that they want to tell to actually be able to happen. One of the biggest contrivances in 13 Sentinels. Okay, let's talk about the backstory. It's very obvious that this plot was written in such a way that the universe would just happen to make this plot go down the way it did. Tons of stuff happens with no rhyme or reason, you just have to accept it. Characters conveniently overhear conversations they didn't intend to. They happen to be at the right place at the right time for no fucking reason. All that kind of stuff. Those are all contrivances. The backstory is something like, evil old guy manipulates dumbass scientist into creating a virus or war or something, kills everyone on Earth, fucks everything forever, so the characters need to find a new planet to inhabit. It'll be millions of years before the ships get there, so they make clones of themselves that I guess will be born and start growing once they're 18 years away from their new planet. They want the new humans to have knowledge of human history and culture, like to actually personally experience human culture. They absolutely 100% have the technology to just copy their own consciousness and memories onto the new clones so that they will just be new reborn humans once they arrive at the new planet. But no, they don't do that for some reason. They give the stupidest, most fucking god-awful, garbage, worthless, embarrassing throwaway line to explain why they choose to do this stupid bullshit instead of the thing that I just described. They say something meaningless and retarded like, oh, we want the new humans to take a different path or something like that, you know? So we want to make a bunch of humans that won't make the same mistakes that this humanity did. Thinking about this in a logical way, this is, of course, insanely stupid. Like, should we send our own consciousness forward since we lived this life and we can learn from the mistakes that caused these bad things to happen? No. Obviously, let's just make the best way to avoid this mistake is to literally fucking forget all of history that happened and just make fresh new babies and just, I guess, cross your fingers that things will go better this time. Great idea. Very logical. Makes a lot of sense. No. Obviously, it's more practical and a better idea to construct an entire fucking virtual reality with its own supercomputer AI that manages the whole world and all the fake people inside it. If they want the kids to have cultural experiences, why don't they also just pre-program certain memories into them? Oh wait, they actually did. Amaguchi and Yuki both talk about how they have the same exact childhood memories as one another, meaning that they had fake memories implanted of a life that they didn't personally experience within the zones, the small areas that they're locked into. So clearly, they're fine with giving the kids fake memories. Why not just do that for all of their memories instead of making this whole fucking stupid VR thing? And why make the multiple different time periods, like different zones of different points in time? Another garbage throwaway line to explain that one is, oh, well, you know, if we put the different kids in different time periods to make sure it's, you know, we don't know when humanity, like, went astray or some shit like that, right? So So we'll put kids in different time periods in Japanese culture history so that hopefully one of them will be before the time point at which humanity went astray. Seriously, okay, they're the last survivors of humanity. They're making clones and spaceships and whatnot, coming up with a plan, right? Like, what fucking drug-addled, coked out of his mind Xanax dipshit would ever think, oh, we should make a VR for the kids and put them all in different, highly specific points in Japanese history? Why? It makes no sense why these characters would come to this decision. Even through the game's own stupid fucking logic, if they're trying to make this new humanity start fresh before humanity went wrong, even though that's, dumb as fuck in the first place, and humanity was wiped out by very specific individuals, not like a gradual cultural decline. But whatever, okay? Wouldn't that mean that any of the kids that you put further on into the future might still be a part of this went wrong portion of humanity, and thus could cause the downfall of society once again? And B, if you're going to make all these kids grow up in completely different time periods with different cultures, and then when they're 18, they're all just supposed to be dumped into the present, expected to form a singular society, like immediately just adapt to the fact that, one, they lived a bullshit lie in the first place, and two, they've all grown up in different cultures and they're just gonna get along now? And how about universal control? Oh dear lord, there are so many questions about universal control. Why does it do the things that it does? Why doesn't it do the things that it doesn't do? It just does whatever the fuck the plot feels like having it do at any moment. When the Sentinel appears in 1945, why does universal control allow the Sentinel to exist in the world and have, NPC people see it and think that it's a weapon for World War II? But in 1985, when a Sentinel shows up, universal control doesn't come up with some excuse for its existence that the people of the society would believe. It just erases that moment in time and makes people think that it was a gas explosion or a helicopter crash. If it can wipe everyone's memories of people seeing the Sentinel and fix all that shit, why can't it just fix the building that was destroyed as well? Why wouldn't it just remove anyone that saw it in 1945? Why can Amaguchi just fucking leave the city and find out that his entire life is a lie? Could Universal Control not have done anything up to that point to stop that from happening? Why does Universal Control stop people from learning the truth about the VR thing and time traveling and shit? Hell, if it's all in a single virtual reality, why are there multiple different Universal Controls, right? I mean, if one district goes down, Universal Control doesn't seem to fix it, even though it keeps functioning in the other sections, the other districts, okay? Why wouldn't it all be the same program running everything? Some of the plot twists retroactively make previous plot twists meaningless or stupid too. Why do they even live in what appears to be artificially created metal discs when the whole world is a fake VR world in the first place? The fact of the matter is, they didn't make the fucking VR thing or make the multiple time zones in the VR thing because it's a logical step in this sci-fi universe for the characters to design it this way or do anything like this. They did it because it would be really convenient to the story if it just so happened in a way that it would look like it was time travel, but then you could get a twist where it's not actually time travel. That's it. That's the only reason why any of these decisions were made. Okay? The events of the story don't happen because they make sense for them to happen, or they're natural for them to happen. They happen because they're contrivances that make the story play out in the way that the writer wants it to play out and nothing more. If you take everything at face value and don't question anything, it makes sense, right? You're like, oh, I was wondering why this happened, and now we get an explanation. Groovy! But if you take 2 fucking seconds to stop and ask yourself, why? Why would this happen like this? Why would this be designed like this? Why did this happen to go down in this particular way? What series of events led to this decision being made? Like, how the fuck can people even learn that they're in a VR at all? If they explicitly made the VR to raise the kids in different time periods, why can you do all of this bullshit within the VR? Why are there ways to warp to the other time zones? Why can you access the code of the VR from inside the program? Why can the Sentinels interact with the program? Right? Why the fuck? And if it was arbitrarily made by Okino, why did he make them that way? Why is it that only certain people can use the Sentinels? Okino made the Sentinels. Why didn't he just make it so that anyone can use the Sentinels? Why the fuck would any of this shit be designed in this way by the people who made it? Every tiny little thing that happens because, well, they said so. No question. Just accept it at face value and move on. And that's not even mentioning the fucking entire conflict of the game. The Daimos, the kaiju, okay, have literally no explanation. You know, the crux of the plot, the antagonist, the only reason that there is any conflict in the entire story at all, the only reason something is going wrong, the Daimos, the fucking excuse this hack writer cooks up is that it was a coding mistake resulting from copying code from some old fucking video game as an excuse for, I think, controlling weather systems or something. I don't think I can overstate how this is probably the stupidest thing I've ever seen in any fiction. I predicted every single plot twist before it happened in this game because they're all really tropey and obvious, and the things that they expect you to believe don't make any sense in the first place. And also the game just is so long-winded and takes so much time that if you haven't theorized every fucking twist before it happens, you just must not be thinking. But I did not predict this plot point because I would have never thought of something that makes so little sense or is so fucking dumb. An old video game is somehow compatible with a complex virtual reality program. It somehow has an AI or self-awareness enough to adapt its own function to create kaiju through the means of the VR, including taking control of the material factories, repurposing existing designs for space exploration vehicles, I guess, and terraforming equipment into the giant monsters, shifting them between the different time zones that exist within the VR, and so on. The kaiju created for some reason, you know, they strive to attack the physical access point to the VR's mainframe, which also exists within the VR for some fucking reason, even though there is no reason for it to exist, given the purpose that the VR was made in the first place. The entire conflict of the story is happening for no real reason. No one, like, fucking bug tested the system and found this bullshit before launching the program? How the fuck could you overlook this? Oh my god. God fucking ugh. Now, I want to show you a very specific scene from early in the game. This was when I was still having the most fun with it, but this was a huge red flag. This is what got me thinking, actually, I really don't see how this could be twisted around to secretly be good writing. Maybe it's just actually bad writing, right? So here you go.
だけど今日は失敗だった。ぬかるんでて靴ドロドロ。元気ないけどどうした？別に。また打ち解けられなかったこと気にしてんでしょ。めぐみはみんなの前だと寡黙だからな。頭いいの鼻にかけてて意地悪そうに見えてるんだよ。実はめぐみが白馬の王子様を本気で待ってるのほほん娘だって分かったらもっと気軽に話せると思うけど、私みたいに動画上げてカミングアウトしてみたら？それは勘弁して。そういえばトミー歌うまいのね。稲葉うさぎ動画見てくれたんだ。あんなにうまいなんて。帰ったら新作あげるつもり。どうしたの？なんか今池の方が光らなかった？車のライトじゃないの？ 朝どっか飛ばされたし、もうこれってさ、危うく死ぬとこだったんじゃない？なんなの？
This is probably the worst individual scene in the entire game. All right? Other scenes are like other aspects of the game are worse if you think about the subtext of it and how it fits into the larger plot, but this is probably the worst scene to watch. Let me break it down. This is where I've actually got to talk about subtext. See, you have explicit text, as in what you are told, what characters say, the information directly conveyed to the audience. Then you have subtext, or information that the audience is meant to come to on their own, from questioning why things are the way they are. Explicit text in dialogue is like a character tells you some information, and you, as the audience, just accept it as a fact, right? Subtext in dialogue is when a character says something, and it gives you some information, but it also tells you something about the character who spoke the line, right? Because the line isn't strictly the truth, it just paints his or her perspective, and may see to his or her characterization. Most people who study creative writing, like myself, tend to vastly prefer subtext to explicit text, if given the option, because we just like information to be conveyed with subtlety, and we also like having to do the manual labor of figuring out the information ourselves, rather than just being told the information without having to use our fucking brains. Let's look at this scene a little more closely. So this has it all, okay? This is actually something that if I went back and was a teaching assistant for like a creative writing class or something, I'd use this scene to teach people how not to write a story. First, we've got our character, Megumi, saying jack shit, okay? We don't know anything about these two characters. We only really know that we've seen Tomi before in a different time period, and that it's weird that she's also here in the future, okay? We're also introduced to an actual future because this is the first scene in the game that's marked as 2024, so this is the first scene that represents something that's actually ahead of where we are in reality right now, 2020 or 2021 or whatever, okay? Anyways, the first couple lines, they're a little unnatural, but mostly fine, you know? Tomi then says, "You look bummed," despite not really being communicated by the scene itself. We're just told that by the character. Then Tomi explicitly states exactly what is bothering Megumi with 100% accuracy as far as we are made aware, whilst framing the wording in a way that is extremely unnatural and clearly serves to have the character be stating exposition in a place where it doesn't make sense for the character to state exposition. Think about it. Imagine if you, okay, maybe you're kind of lonely or something, you're not feeling great, your friend asks you why you look glum, and then without you answering them, they fucking say something like, "Oh, you must be thinking about your loneliness and unpopularity, huh?" It's completely unnatural for a person to make that sort of assumption when any number of things could be making someone upset, and it's incredibly odd and cringy to hear someone verbalize not just the feeling of that loneliness, but explicitly that no one talks to her in the environment, right? Other than just being very unnatural dialogue that a real human would never say in this situation, it's also incredibly lazy writing because literally nothing is happening. But a character is still going out of her way to tell us, the audience, that Megumi is unpopular. Both characters should know that, right? There's no reason for it to be explicitly stated, but we, the audience, are just being told something, right? We aren't shown her being lonely or having trouble socializing or anything like that. We're not shown the story. We're told by this other character who has no reason to be dumping exposition in-universe. Megumi does not respond to this, and then Tomi immediately just assumes that she's correct, and then immediately starts dumping more exposition about Megumi, explicitly stating her characteristics. We aren't shown Megumi being unpopular or quiet in public or social situations. We know fuck all nothing about this character. This is her first time on screen, yet without her uttering even a full sentence of dialogue, we're just explicitly told what her traits are. Now, this line, not sure which is worse, this is kind of okay? This is much better dialogue. It's unnecessary and adds flavor to what is otherwise just a cold, dead fucking exposition dump, right? Just the character acting as a diegetic narrator and stating facts about another character. This line at least represents some level of subtext. This is something an actual human would say. A human would stop and ruminate and be unsure of themselves. They would actually have an opinion and not just state objectively true universal facts. Then we're told even more explicitly what traits Megumi has and what we should think about the character. Still, mind you, Megumi has not actually done anything or shown any of the traits that Tomi is telling you that she has. She's just sitting there, not speaking, letting the fucking hackneyed lazy exposition be shat into your mouth instead of actually allowing the audience to come to any of these observations on their own. Then Megumi still hasn't said a goddamn word, and Tomi instantly transitions into a crudely dumping exposition about herself, okay? She starts talking about Megumi's characterization out of nowhere with no justification, and then she takes the topic she has no reason to start in the first place, and then explicitly tells Megumi things that, once again, both characters would naturally already be aware of. Tomi has no reason to explicitly tell Megumi that she posts videos online. There was no need to say, like me, because both characters would naturally already understand what that meant, okay? It's just a lazy hack writer not thinking about subtext at all and why a character would be saying a particular line of dialogue in a particular way based on their own personal experience and situation. Just using their mouth like a fucking fleshlight to say unnatural things that serve no conversational purpose other than to just inform the fucking player all of this dog shit exposition. Not to mention, again, that all of this dialogue is about telling the audience the plot rather than showing them. This is still a little cringy and bad, but nowhere near as bad as the previous lines, okay? Then this dialogue is also okay. It's more natural. Perhaps there's an element of subtext to this statement about posting a new video. Perhaps it informs the audience that Tomi is diligent in her personal projects, and the fact that Tomi is saying this tells us that she isn't shy about letting her friends see her personal work, which, you know, naturally some people might be, and that she actively encourages it. That's the only subtext that this could possibly inform us. Again, none of these characters have any real, character traits that are relevant to the story, so it's, even if it was informing us this through subtext, it's not like it matters, but okay. It's still better dialogue. Okay, then we come to probably just a car headlight is pretty generic and bog standard, but even if generic, it still has a hint of subtext in it that informs us maybe Megumi, maybe a realist, someone with low expectations who may downplay things. It informs us that she thought of a possible explanation for Tomi's statement about a light or whatever the fuck she said before Tomi did. Perhaps Megumi thinks a little bit faster than Tomi. That's really stretching it of what you want to call subtext. It's just a whatever line, okay? The character's reactions to the giant robot appearing are very unnatural, okay? Perhaps Tomi thinking about her soaked clothes before losing her shit at almost getting crushed by this magic teleporting Gundam may be an element of subtext, that perhaps this is something that happens often in this universe and thus wouldn't be that surprising to the characters, or maybe it informs us that Tomi is an extremely abnormal person, but no, it's not subtext. None of those things are true at all. It's just weird, shitty dialogue. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. Then it jumps, and it says 6 months or half a year later or something, but it's still in 1985, which literally just tells you that the time travel is fake. It just flat out tells you that it's not passing in a linear fashion. But anyways. Then we're told that Megumi, the character who has yet to express a personality trait on her own without Tomi just awkwardly telling the audience what her personality traits are with no care for subtext, this character has now fallen in love with Juro off screen. Amazing writing. Wow. You're really blowing my mind there. I know this is just one scene, obviously, but this is kind of the problem with the whole game. Subtext. No one gave a shit about thinking about the subtext of anything. The subtext of the dialogue isn't there. The subtext of the plot and backstory and the plot twists isn't there. If you think about it at all, what the subtext of something would be, it just doesn't make sense for this character to say things in this way. If you think about it at all, it doesn't make sense for this decision to have been made, or this, like, artificial construct to have been designed in the way that it functions in the story, or this event to have happened to go down the way it did. It's all contrivances. The game has no subtext, period. And frankly, this probably isn't even the worst thing about the game. It has some gameplay that's fine, I guess. It gets boring after a while. It doesn't hold up for the whole game, in my opinion. It has some weird RPG mechanics for progression and leveling up that are also pretty poorly implemented. But no. If I'm being honest, I think the biggest problem with the game is that it's just fucking boring. Okay? I was really slogging near the end, pushing myself to finish this game. Here, I'll describe my experience with the overarching game. Okay, start the game, like it. Pretty into it, seeing some red flags, but they're pretty common red flags for certain bad writing habits, but they're also not necessarily things that would inhibit the strengths of the game from shining through. Play more of it for hours and hours and hours. Game is getting more dull by the minute. Holy shit, please kill me, dear God, and my suffering. Please let the game be over already. It's so fucking boring. Nearing the end, the questions are getting answered. The more, I guess, interesting questions, quote unquote. Most of the questions that are answered through the middle of the game are pretty fucking, contrived and, arbitrary. But anyways, but since I used my brain for more than 2 seconds, I have way, way, way more questions, contradictions that I've identified that have yet to be addressed. Oh God, I can tell that I'm nearing the ending, and 90% of my questions haven't been addressed yet, and they clearly aren't going to be addressed. Oh God, these contradictions aren't like clues to a plot twist, they're just actually fucking mistakes. Oh God, there's so many fucking contrivances. Also, it's still boring. Thank God it's over. I hate everything. Now, I'm being honest. I don't see how people play this game and don't get bored of it. Okay? This is the structure of the game. All of the mysteries, pretty much, are dumped on you all at once in the first couple hours. Maybe the first 3, 4, 5 hours, okay? What's this time travel? What's up with these kaijus? What's up with this fucking talking cat? What's up with all this alien bullshit? So on and so forth. For the next 20 hours, the game just remains exactly like that. You already saw pretty much all of the mysteries for the most part. The only other mysteries that are addressed are, again, the arbitrary MacGuffin ones that don't matter. I think the last moment in the game, or I was newly intrigued by a new question, was, like I said, when Amaguchi tried to leave the city and sees that he's in like a weird dome. I was like, what the fuck? That was the last time that I had an idea of all of the mysteries still left to explain and a general concept of what was going on in the story and what still had to be addressed, and then something new was added to the equation, okay? Most of the game is just you sitting there with unanswered questions, slowly sliding a finger in and out of your asshole and perhaps, through your eyeballs as the most tiny, pointless, insignificant pieces of microscopic information are slowly trickled into your gullet as the minutes and hours grind down. It's just you sitting there with an understanding of all the things that still have left to be explained, with all of the potential theories you've come up with that might serve as potential explanations for all the shit that you've seen so far, and just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for the game to fucking tell you which one of your theories is correct for each aspect of the mysteries, right? That's all that happens. Nothing else happens. There's some dumb parts that try to be like exciting and dramatic, but since you already know that everyone lives in the story and that they're all like cooperating and working together at the ending, there's no tension at all. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly just rehashing the same shit you already know, telling you tiny pieces of information that are either things you've already heard a bit and essentially mean nothing to you, like hearing this character vaguely reference the Deimos code thing, which was pointless and a waste of time anyways, but also yet another instance of why the fuck would it ever be designed like this? How did this happen? But anyways, yeah. It's just scene after scene where you just see something that vaguely hints at the same shit over and over, and eventually the game will finally come out and say, this is the answer to that mystery. All of the shit that happens between then, it's not like adding clues to the mystery. Everything that you're shown is more or less consistent with the vast majority of the potential theories you could have come up with by this point. Seriously, there is zero entertainment value to anything else happening. Okay, for comparison's sake, let's look at something that handles mindfuck mysteries pretty well. Virtue's Last Reward, okay? Now, it's insulting to call 13 Sentinels a mindfuck game, since all of the plot twists are generic anime twists you've seen a trillion times before. There's nothing creative or surprising about any of them. You can predict all of them with ease, and since they're so tropey, it's incredibly easy to just guess them ahead of time. Not because the game is well crafted with those clues, but because they're pretty fucking obvious and easy conclusions to come to. And it just takes so much time that you have all the time in the world to just like, okay, well, here's the potential explanations that, you know, I've already seen in other media. It's going to be one of these things, and then it just is one of those things, so. But anyways, so in Virtue's Last Reward, you're dumped somewhere with no information. You've got questions, right? Why the fuck are we here? You know, you also have a sense of the limitations of the story. First, it seems like you're just in this weird warehouse place. You're all kidnapped. You see all the other characters. They're confused, so they don't know what's happening as far as they are making it aware to you. Okay, you're forced to play these kinds of games or whatever. So you have a sense of the limits of the story. You know what you know, and you know what you don't know, right? You think, okay, well, this will take place in this area. These are, humans, whatever. Why are they here? Etc. Then, as you continue, they keep, engaging you in expanding your sense of the story's limitations, right? Wait, there's also some kind of time travel involved? Okay, I'll incorporate that. Well, now I have, a wider assumption of, what the story is going to be about, okay? And it goes without saying that the sci-fi in VLR is way better than in 13 Sentinels. 13 Sentinels is just generic shit with no originality. VLR actually comes up with its own actually interesting sci-fi concepts that break away from the typical mold. But anyways, as you continue, you get comfortable thinking, okay, I understand what questions are in the air, what mysteries are, now we just need to solve them. But then, bam, you get used to going down this one timeline, you hit a roadblock, you go back and you try a different timeline, and all of a sudden, there's there's a dead body of someone you've never fucking seen before that's not one of the characters that you've had in this closed environment. What the fuck is happening now, okay? Now we've got even more questions, and the scope of the narrative is expanding ever so slightly. VLR knows that it can't just dump all of the mysteries onto you all at once and then tell you jack shit for hours and then hope you still care by the time they reveal the truths. A good mystery needs to continue to make you get comfortable with the information that you already have and then throw a wrench into it, a new angle, a new mystery to solve. 13 Sentinels does not do this. Almost everything that happens in the game after the first 5 hours or so is more or less consistent, at least, with everything else you've already seen in the entire game. There's no wrenches. Nothing to keep it fresh, throw you off your current understanding. It never establishes an understanding until the end, so it never has a false understanding to throw you off, right? It's quite literally just what is happening. 25 hours pass, we'll finally tell you what's happening. Everything between then is dull and uninteresting. Just time sink for the sake of time sink. This story is not that complicated. This could have been told in a 20th of the time. I really just don't understand people anymore. How? Seriously, how can people look at this and not see how generic and shitty it is, right? All of the characters are generic archetypes with no unique qualities. You've seen them countless times before. If they have any agency in the plot, it's being motivated by things that you've seen countless times before. The plot is filled with a shitload of MacGuffins. Seriously, there are so many MacGuffins. Most of the story is about just chasing down MacGuffins, meaningless, arbitrary plot elements that only serve to waste time. Like the Deimos Code, the thing where, the characters themselves are sending a signal to the kaiju that are making them attack, even though the only thing that amounts to in the story is just giving a half-assed justification for why the old Jiro tried to kill everyone, which is in and of itself a half-assed justification for why they could have the trope of a main character sharing a body with a murderer. And once again, I ask, why the fuck is it designed in such a way that the people themselves are sending the signal to the kaiju? Who built it like that? It's not like the kaiju attack the people directly. The kaiju just go after the physical entry point to the source code of the VR, which I once again ask, why does such a thing exist in the system? Why would someone build this into the program that only existed to give these kids the experience of human culture? But anyways, yeah. The plot is also just a collection of generic tropes. Almost all the twists are shitty tropes you've seen countless times before. What, did I just, imagine all of the TV shows movies I've seen in my entire life? Is all the content that I've consumed in the past just like the result of a fever dream? How do people not see this as tired? How do people look at these tropes and think, yep, love seeing that one again? Most of this game is just wasted following uninteresting characters through their own personal involvement with the story, which a lot of the time is practically nothing, or otherwise only serves to be a MacGuffin in and of itself that could have probably been taken out without the crux of the plot being any different. Did Megumi really need to go around shooting all of those people and, waste an hour of my time, just one after the other? Or could they have just written some other less time-consuming excuse for how they all got the nanomachine thing that makes them use the Sentinels? Which is, in and of itself, a time-wasting MacGuffin. Most of the characters only impact the plot in that they eventually use the Sentinels. Most of them have incredibly minor roles in the larger story, and since it doesn't even really matter that they all get in their Sentinels, since it's an arbitrary goal anyways, even just looking at the gameplay, you can beat the game. You can beat the whole game with just six characters or less, realistically speaking. So, most of the game is just a waste of time. Some of them, just by themselves, are more entertaining than others. For example, even though Nenji was basically pointless in the larger story, his, Total Recall section was kind of fun, okay? And didn't overstay its welcome is the most important part. But most of the game is just a fucking boring drag of meaningless tangents and tedious MacGuffin chasing. Look, I don't bring up the generic and lackluster character writing as an inherent criticism. The game is clearly not about deep or nuanced characters, so I don't really care that they're not deep or nuanced, okay? It probably works in the game's favor for all of the characters to just be really simplistic archetypes. The game should be playing to its strengths, not wasting time with stuff that's going to be weak no matter what. My philosophy on art is that obviously, it's all subjective, so that if there's one strength that's really special, that strength alone makes the experience worthwhile, even if the rest of it is pretty flawed. If the game had a prominent strength that I liked a lot, I'd be fine with just hand-waving away all the parts that are weak or I disliked. There'd still be criticisms that I would have with it, but they don't take away from the core strength that makes it worth playing, okay? The point is that no part of this game is actually good enough to be called a strength. The plot is predictable, frustrating, boring, sloppy, slapped together with no consideration for making things seem natural or rational developments, and even then, I'd be fine with all that if the game was just more exciting in the moment. If it, embraced its dumb, nonsensical plot structure and, was just clearly strung together to make these twists and crazy events happen. And if it just had a ton of crazy shit happen all the time, that would make it fun to watch at least. It would give it some sort of strength, some appeal to strive for. As of now, it only appeals to people who just don't see how bad every element of the game is, how unimpressive it all is, and how little thought was actually put into each part of it. Or it only appeals to just people who haven't experienced these tropes enough times to get sick of them yet. Whew, okay, on to the next one. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Most people who followed me at all know that a lot of the core reasons I hate, already know a lot of the core reasons I hate this game, but frankly, most of those reasons, like the game being unfaithful to the original, the game being more fanfiction and fan service than actual worthwhile content, the creators being disrespectful to the original game in the interviews and decisions they make and so on, are also complaints that I have with other shitty FF7 spin-offs like Advent Children and Crisis Core and whatever. The fact of the matter is, these are made for people who want to view this game through rose-tinted glasses. It's nostalgia baiting, right? These games are more of a way to let people who want to think of themselves as fans have all their, middle school fan fictions canonized. I get it, okay? When people like something, they fanboy out a little bit, and often indulge in fanboy-esque behavior. I'll come back to that in a second, but, you know, for people who have already heard me talk about this a million times, I actually want to talk about the game itself for a bit, rather than the things that are true of basically all of the bad FF7 spin-offs. Okay, I mean, I've beaten this horse to death so much, so I'll just probably breeze through it. The gameplay actually could be decent with some adjustments and a few more added mechanics. Right now, the strategies one can employ are incredibly simplistic. Well, kind of. Okay, the game is clunky, especially when it comes to attacking or attacks that you're expected to be able to dodge. The dodge has no true invincibility. Some characters like Aeris can't dodge for shit, so getting certain enemies aggroed on Aeris puts her into situations where she can't avoid large damage. You can't really control your party members in combat and have no real way to influence enemy aggro either. Even if you pick, like, Tifa and just charge an enemy and try to draw their aggro, Aeris might just wander right next to the enemy because the AI is moronic, and the enemy might just aggro her with an attack that she won't be able to move or avoid, even if you take manual control of her as soon as you see what's happening. There's pervasive elements of unfairness in this way, where your team might come out flawlessly, or your team might get jacked up a little bit and need healing just because your party member AI did some dumb shit. Enemies aggroed party members that won't be able to take care of themselves, or you won't be able to get them out of the way. You can't tell your allies where to position themselves, what to do, how to act. There's no indicator ahead of time to tell you who an enemy is going to aggro in your party. You just don't have the information to make more tactical decisions. So sometimes you just eat a dick for no real reason. I'm not saying that you die. The game is actually very easy, but just the fact that how well you do varies so much based on factors that are outside of your control as the player means that the game is limited in its ultimate strategy to just the most basic, obvious brain-dead shit, right? Like, the characters have interesting little elements of nuance, like Barrett, for example, can cock his gun much faster than normal when performed immediately after a special ability or after a full go-through of his regular attack, which means that you can plan your ATB usage around how much time they'll take and how much time that they'll take up, in addition to the amount that your gauge will increase when you get the fast cock to increase your alternate attack charge. The game is fun to play, I think, because it does have elements that you can measure and optimize. But the problem is, when faced with another situation where your party members are fucking up, where you're getting hit by an attack that you clearly dodged, or where enemy decisions or unclear behavioral patterns end up fucking you in some way or another, these things have so much larger of an impact on your optimization than the small little nuances you can waste your time with. It wouldn't be hard to salvage this gameplay structure, and I even like the RPG progression systems, but in practice, the game is mostly an annoying, obnoxious chore to play, especially for, like, perfectionist people like me that want to be optimal. In fact, and I only really realized this in these last couple days after having played so many more games that came out in 2020 and replaying some of the other titles I'm going to talk about to refresh my thoughts on them. And you have no idea how much it pains me to say this, how much agony I am in right now. But honestly, I think FF7R had the most engaging gameplay of anything I played this year. Kind of. Scratch that. Anything that released this year. I played Hollow Knight this year, and that's still way more fun, obviously. But that's not to say I think the gameplay is good in this game, the way it is. The gameplay needs much better player communication. It needs to give you information like enemy aggro. It needs ways of controlling enemy aggro or otherwise controlling your party's overarching positions in a stage to be more optimal. It needs enemies to be less mobile, especially flying enemies are really fucking obnoxious in the way that you have to fight them and in the way that they move around the stage in shitty ways. Okay, but anyways. Or otherwise have ways of slowing or restricting enemy movement so that they can't just mosey on over to whatever party member they feel like, even ones that can't dodge or move so well. It needs clearer animations with some of the enemy types to indicate what they're doing and when. It needs time not to pass at all when switching between characters or performing actions. I should be able to activate a move and then instantly pause and switch to someone else with zero time lag. The game needs to better inform you how enemy moves and actions function if it's not immediately apparent. As in, do it through the analysis materia if you have to. It's really annoying when, say, a move doesn't have an obvious way to avoid it. Like, A giant bull rush attack. I'll try dodging it to the side because it's a linear attack. Oh wait, I tried that, but the move just auto-tracks anyways even if I go to the side. How was I supposed to know that it was going to auto-track? Do I just fucking trial and error this bullshit until I stumble upon a consistent way to avoid this move? There should be, okay, next thing. There should be a meter that tells you how close you are to interrupting an enemy. There's a stagger meter when an enemy is off balance, but there isn't a damage meter to tell you how close you are to dealing enough damage to put them off balance in the first place, if they're an enemy that gets into their off balance state through damage. Sometimes an enemy is holding a party member, or otherwise about to do an attack that you would like to interrupt, and you want to deal enough damage to knock them out of that animation, but you don't know how close they are to that damage threshold. This is important because this is essentially your only tool to interrupt enemy actions in this game, or put some enemies off balance to start dealing stagger damage in the first place, which is something you'd probably want to be able to plan for and make sure that you have a high ATB by the time that you get to that point. Most of the bosses, once they pass a certain damage threshold, without warning, they'll become invincible. And usually a cutscene will play that puts them into the next phase of the fight. This wouldn't be as annoying if they just fucking let you know ahead of time when it was going to happen. But there's like a shitload of times where I went, okay, now let's max out the stagger gauge and start dumping some serious damage on this enemy. This is what I've been working towards. This is what I've been planning my attacks around. And then I stagger them. But then 2 seconds later, the boss becomes invincible and goes to the next phase of the fight. And all of the ATB that I spent just knocking him down was completely wasted. And those are just off the top of my head from what I remember. Its problems really make the experience of playing the game obnoxious and infuriating to a perfectionist like myself, who so eagerly wants to play fucking 40 chess levels of strategy, but so often gets spit in my face for trying it because some element of the game design, most often the enemy AI and behavior, is preventing that strategy from actually being as deep as it honestly could be with some tweaking. At its core, the game is actually quite fun, mechanically speaking, in my opinion. All that aside, I also wanted to talk about an aspect of the gameplay that I recently had a sort of epiphany on. I realized that things in the middle suck. Everything that's in the middle is the worst. I mean this in multiple different senses, but for this, I'm talking about game balance and mechanics. You know how in Dark Souls most players probably don't summon help? You can. It's a mechanic in the game. There's no real penalty for it. You can just do it. You can just summon an ally. It's a tool at your disposal. Just say the word. But you don't. You don't because most people probably consider that to be taking the pussy way out, right? The game was clearly built for single player anyways. So, even though you could, you ignore that gameplay mechanic entirely, unless you're really struggling. But even then, you would feel guilty for utilizing that mechanic. But what about, say, like Destiny 2 or some MMO? What if you do a raid? You pretty much need allies, right? In the same situation, you have the ability to summon online help. But in this situation, you don't ruminate over it. You don't feel guilt over it. This should be obvious. It's a matter of game balance. One of them, you really don't need to summon help. You don't need to summon help to play Dark Souls. And one of them you do, okay? Through balance, your brain instinctively categorizes mechanics as part of the core game or as something optional, something secondary, something unnecessary, something to give you an advantage if you can't fucking hack it with, like, the core elements. Some people do this more than others. And what people categorize as, what is in their mind also depends on their experiences. See, if a game is really easy, it's fine, because you can just blow through it no problem. If a game is really hard, it's fine, because you focus, you put your effort into using your tools and overcoming the challenge. If a game is medium, however, it starts to kind of drag, and that's what I've been experiencing lately. If a game is too easy with a certain mechanic, I drop that mechanic. That's typically how I play most things, okay? I look at what's necessary, I push myself to find what is the most optimal thing that I can possibly do. All of the time. Like, I played Celeste for the first time this year, too, and it wasn't easy enough for me to just breeze through in, like, the snap of a finger, but it wasn't hard enough at any point to present me with any real challenge. Even the hardest stages and the hardest, like, optional, berries that you pick up, strawberries, I guess, just a couple of attempts, even just banging my head against the wall with no real thought or effort, like I was literally playing badly. But it was never hard. It just felt annoying because it wasn't truly difficult. So when I die, I just try to do it even faster and faster the next time until I cleared it maybe 30 seconds later, because it never required me to actually put in effort. I was hoping the game would be like Super Meat Boy. Meanwhile, we've got this shitty fucking mobile game essentially for the new Super Meat Boy, which I've heard is garbage. I haven't played a satisfyingly challenging platformer in over 5 years, I think. Everything is piss baby easy, or it's part of this middle ground that I'm referring to, where it's still frustrating because it wastes your time with a few deaths, but it's not actually satisfying to overcome because it's not actually ever really hard. Now, for FF7R, that means that for 98% of the game, I don't use any MP. No magic, no healing spells. I never used a single item in combat in the entire game. I never used a single summon, except just to see what they do. And even then, I ignored it most of the time. I think I used one summon at one time, and I was like, whatever. I also ignored limit breaks, as they were also unnecessary. However, that's the thing. The game isn't easy enough or hard enough to make this work. I can't nicely balance it for myself to create the optimal experience. In almost every encounter in the game, you don't need to use magic. You just don't. You don't need to spend a single drop of MP. You just use the core gameplay mechanics with each character and their established tools. However, in very rare parts of the game actually really does expect you to use magic, and it teeters the line between being something that I'm forced to use and being something that I can ignore completely. Because in the parts where I clearly don't need to use any magic, I was having more fun, a lot more fun. I just don't use anything that I don't need to. I continue to hone my complete mastery of the fundamental mechanics. But sometimes the game would really drive a stick up my ass in some encounters when I didn't use magic. And I experienced the same feeling that, we all get when summoning help in Dark Souls. The feeling of, come on, I've beaten so much of this game without relying on this fucking pussy shit. I shouldn't be doing this. I feel bad for even doing this. That's how I felt whenever I used magic in this game. And that really brought down my enjoyment levels while playing FF7R. Frankly, it's just not balanced well. Mechanics should be either necessary or unnecessary in game balance. Either make the game actually require the use of magic in more than just a few fights in the game, or make it completely ignorable. As it stands, I feel filthy when using magic, when I know for a fact I don't need to, and that I'd be playing in a more mathematically optimal way by just not using any MP at all, but I'm miserable trying to beat some of the fights in the game that they just expect you to use magic with. Both feel wrong to me. Using magic when I know for a fact that I don't need to, and that, it's better to not, because it's a resource game. If you can save more resources, that means you're playing more optimally. But then sometimes it's just like, no, fuck you. Oh, one relatively major issue I have with the gameplay is that it just isn't incorporated very well. The blending of action strategy and RPG aren't mixed properly. Let me explain. Let's look at, say, XCOM, which blends grid-based strategy gameplay with the overworld decisions for what missions to do, what facilities to build, what research to do, and so on. How well you do in the grid-based gameplay determines the survival of your best soldiers and their health. And depending on how you play and what missions you play, you also get greater rewards for your other style of gameplay. If you use fewer explosives, you'll have more corpses if the aliens remain intact, and other rewards that give you a slight or significant edge. Then, if you do the overworld gameplay and decision-making like shit, eventually, it won't matter how good you are at the grid-based combat, you simply won't be able to win against the increasing difficulty of the encounters. Both styles of gameplay are necessary and feed into one another. However, if we look at this action RPG, it doesn't blend well. I beat this game almost never spending a drop of MP, and many other resources you have, because my focus, as it is with every game I play, is to try to optimize. Logically speaking, it's a game where your most limited resource that feeds all your other resources is MP. MP recovers your health with healing spells. MP gives you all of the magic tools. Nothing else really matters, except for items, I guess, which are single use like they are in most RPGs. So it stands to reason that if you can beat an encounter spending 20 MP and 3 items, but you could have beaten the same encounter only spending 4 MP and no items, the less costly one is clearly more optimal. It's clearly that you did better at the game to get the one that costs less, right? The problem with this game is that most of the gameplay can be trivialized by one style of gameplay whilst ignoring the other. I don't need to manage resources if I can beat almost every encounter in the game spending 0 MP and 0 items. The problem is, most of the stuff that deals any real damage to you is stuff that you can just dodge. Assuming the clunky dodge doesn't screw you over, okay? There's some issues, some clunkiness with that, but you can just play the action strategy element of the game well. You can play it really well. That's the most fun part of it. And you'll never have to manage any resources. You'll never have to spend any magic. None of it. You remove that entire part of the game that is an RPG. My problem with this game is that most of it seems to be designed with the action strategy in mind, although that might be giving the game too much credit since the overarching gameplay isn't cohesive enough for me to think that any of it was designed with any particular goal in mind. Thus, by playing optimally, i.e. not spending any MP and just getting better at the tools that don't cost any resources, and this is even more trivialized by Eris, considering she can exchange ATB for MP by using her move that steals MP from an enemy, or just putting some HP ups on Barret once he has Lifesaver, and just giving him the Chakra ability, which also doesn't cost MP, that will heal all the damage the party takes purely through ATB, not MP. By playing optimally, this game is just action strategy. So I get used to it only being action strategy, a game where I don't have to manage resources or spend any MP or anything, or decide what resources to spend or how much, because I don't need to. I don't need to spend anything, okay? Sometimes encounters more or less just force you to use magic, or otherwise have big attacks that you can't really dodge with the action strategy tools, and it suddenly just gives you this whiplash, because now it's deciding that it does want to be an RPG where you have to take some damage and spend some of your resources to heal. But it did so at the expense of making the action strategy elements and skills that you've developed meaningless, since you can't use them to minimize the damage that you received anymore if some of the attacks are, unavoidable. Obviously, a lot of the enemies need tweaking, and there should probably be more things that that deal some amount of damage to you no matter what, but you can minimize that damage through more strategic decision-making. Like things that force you to block, and you still take some damage when you block, but not the full damage, or situations where you can avoid taking large damage by taking a little bit of damage, but whatever, okay? I think a very easy way to fix this element so that both the action strategy elements and the RPG elements work in harmony is to just make the special abilities cost HP. Make Braver cost HP. Make all of those moves cost a bit of health, like how Persona ensures that you're spending some sort of minor resource in order to deal damage and to kill the enemies quickly enough by using physical skills that cost HP. That way, playing the game well and dodging all the big damaging attacks will still, over time, force you to heal and spend resources. Although, even if that was changed, if that's the only change to the game, then it'd still mean that healing magic is the only magic that you would ever be encouraged to use, and that, and even that, can just be replaced with items instead, healing items. There needs to be more pressure to use actual attack spells or status effect spells, so that the game the game needs to be rebalanced so that the cost of not using them is more expensive than the cost of using them. I played Bug Fables this year as well, and it also has this problem. Doing special moves is so expensive in comparison to just doing regular attacks and then healing later when you take a bit of damage that it would be stupid in 90% of cases to ever use any of the special moves. The easiest way to do this in FF7R would probably be to have the enemies, like, say, slowly charge up big, dangerous attacks that you won't be able to effectively avoid it entirely, and making the magic so strong that the best option would be to damage the enemy, to kill him or to interrupt him before he does the big move, so that you won't have to spend a greater amount of MP healing the damage that he would have otherwise done if you didn't attack him with it, right? Again, Persona 5 does this flawlessly. It's constantly pushing you to use some resources to avoid taking a lot of damage from enemies that you would have to spend more resources to spend on SP, to heal. And you have to strategize in order to do what you need to do with as few resources as possible, utilizing a wide arsenal of tools that will allow you to get more value out of the resources that you are planning to spend if you plan them properly. Make the gameplay styles blend so that both styles are necessary, both action strategy gameplay and calculated resource management decision making. That way, it won't just annoy me when I'm playing several hours of an action strategy game, only to just suddenly run into an enemy that expects me to use magic on him out of nowhere. As it stands, magic is only just barely stronger than the non-magic tools, but at a much greater cost. 0 MP versus some MP is a significantly greater cost. Make the game... Okay, here's another way to do it. Make the game way, way harder, but make it so that magic doesn't need ATB. That's another way of giving magic and spending MP a clear purpose that would perhaps make it a necessity that would mix well and not just be completely outclassed by the less expensive regular skills. Right now, being good at the resource management aspect of the game just means never using a resource, because you don't need to. Nioh is the same way. Nioh also has this problem. It's a blend of two styles of gameplay that aren't mixed well. It feels like an action game most of the time, where you can clutch everything out through the skin of your teeth, but sometimes some enemies aren't actually really possible to fight without getting hit. It's a lot more RNG based, like, will the enemy just dodge your attack or not? Will they attack you with a move that is unreactable or not? Then it suddenly just becomes about RPG elements and having high stats and abusing all of your weird resource based tools, even though most of the game that you're playing can be played without any of that bullshit. The story is obviously stupid. It's just mostly fan service, middle schooler fan fiction of FF7 characters. New shit that's horribly written or has no entertainment value whatsoever and is just a generic waste of time to give you something else to do on your quest, and dumb time travel bullshit riddled with plot holes and stupidity. First of all, the original FF7's ending did not imply that humanity was wiped out, and if you think it did, you were a dumb kid who couldn't handle subtlety at the time. I want to get that out of the way right from the get-go. FF7's story is about life, influence of life, the value and significance of life. Characters die in the story because life has value and the story needs the loss of life to be a weight that is explored. Eris dies because Sakaguchi at the time wanted to express that people's lives don't end when they pass away, that their influence remains in the world even though they are undoubtedly gone and something is forever lost. Sakaguchi went on record stating that when his mother passed away while he was working at Square on previous projects, he experienced this sort of revelation, and he wanted to express that through this game. Sakaguchi doesn't work at Square anymore, and they've been taking a big smelly shit all over his work for a decade or longer now. However, even considering this, and all the FF7 spin-off bullshit that they've been slapping together because they can make money off of the popular IP, because fanboys who are more concerned with fan fiction than the actual artistic integrity of Sakaguchi's work being maintained and accurately expressed will just eat it up. So, see, I like FF7 because it's a cool-ass game with nuanced, well-defined characters with arcs and flaws all pertaining to their relationship with the concept of life and protecting life, because it, to this day, has really striking and creative presentation, camera work, framing. Creativity oozes from every pore of it, and it's, even though it's still 20 years old, and getting older by the minute. I like FF7 because I have respect for the artistic vision of Sakaguchi and his own emotional investment in the project. Most people seem to like FF7 because it's fun to write Cloud X Sephiroth fanfictions, it seems. The vanity of the game is more appealing than the substance. Who cares if FF7R and all the other awful FF7 spin-offs are completely contradicting Sakaguchi's message and purpose. I want my fanfiction portrayed in the canon. I want Gay Cloud at the Honeybee. You know, that's what they seem to think FF7 is, just the surface-level memes, I suppose. But it's fine. You know, if it wasn't a full game, I wouldn't even be bothered by the memes and fanfiction, okay? Even if it blatantly contradicts the original vision of the game. I'm more bothered by the fact that Square can just take a collection of memes and surface-level understandings or blatant surface-level contradictions of the original and call it understanding is to, you know, being generous. It's like asking a fucking 8-year-old to tell you what Brave New World is all about. Sure, he might get the names of some of the characters, maybe some of the surface-level personality traits of them, but nothing deeper than that. That being said, I'm forced to admit that the characters, at least the core characters in this game, if you're going to judge them based on how accurate they are to the original, they aren't anywhere near as bad as like Advent Children, also directed by Nomura. These may not be the same characters with the same character arcs and flaws as in the original, but they at least behave mostly how you would expect. But, like, what? No, really, what? Am I supposed to be impressed by that? Seriously? No, are you fucking serious? Is that how low our standards have dropped? That just being able to copy an existing character's surface-level traits fairly accurately is somehow a praiseworthy feat? Honestly, it should be that much more embarrassing that even though any normal fucking person with a brain can just look at the fucking characters in FF7 and mostly understand how they act, and they still managed to somehow miss the mark that fucking badly with Advent Children and other dog shit like it. How is copying a character that already exists and you have reference material for somehow being praised as though it's so difficult to do? But, anyways, I'm more bothered by the fact that they can just take people's fan fictions of FF7 and just sell it back to them, and people are happy to pay for it. They'll happily pay to have their own fan fiction read back to them. Hell, they cherish the fact that they can pay money to play this game, because the act of paying money in their minds represents them proving their devotion to FF7. The very act of purchasing the game is like a nostalgia bait to make people feel compelled to justify their fanhood. They just want some way to prove to themselves how much they love FF7. And Square says, here, you can totally prove that by just buying this piece of shit. I don't like most remakes. I don't like the idea of just selling something that already exists as if it has any new value associated with it. I also hate when remakes get praised for things that obviously aren't original ideas. Like, there's no reason for a remake to be praised for having shit that the original had. That's literally just copying and pasting. That's not creativity. It's not praiseworthy. I also don't like fan service at all. I like, say, memes of shit that I like, but I don't like when memes are essentially sold to me as a product. Because then the product is just a reminder of how much I like something that already exists, rather than the product itself being something with its own value for me to grow to like. This is especially true when the very fan service is, in and of itself, misunderstanding the original content. All of this shit I've talked about more extensively in other videos and to other people online. Anything I have to like about, say, the setting or the story of FF7R is only that way because it's copying the original. The original should get the credit. If I wanted this content, I'd just go play the original. Everything else in FF7R is just poorly made, with no creativity. The setting is a mess. There's like a bunch of shitty side NPCs that don't fit tonally in with the rest of the world. The very fact that the game is more interactive in that you're actually on the streets or in the train, starts raising more questions. Like, okay, now that with this game we see more regular people, right, in this universe. I didn't see a single NPC walking around this game with a prosthetic leg or arm or even steampunk-esque clothing? What's the point of expanding the world, quote-unquote, if what they show is lazy and shitty and doesn't even seem to be consistent with a kind of universe that has already been established by the original? This is supposed to be a world where some people just might have a Gatling gun for an arm, where someone dresses like Cloud does or Tifa does, and that's normal. No, we see none of that shit. We just see ordinary-looking people in fucking business suits, and then the actual characters look like they live in a completely different world from everyone else, especially the characters from weird shitty spin-off books like Kyrie or Leslie. That's not how you world build. God, every element of this schlock is so uninspired, just so nothing. They do almost nothing with all of these opportunities to expand the world, and a lot of the things that they do expand contradict the original or fuck up the tone. Just a few bad ideas, poorly implemented, and that's it. Just turning every character into a Mary Sue, even if they used to have flaws, saving every character even if their death used to mean something in the story or have some degree of weight, just turning the story into a basic-ass, generic fucking shonen-esque save the day, change the future because we're such goddamn fucking heroes. Look, the game is just fan service and fan fiction, and that's fine. I've made my peace with that. It's for people who want fan service and fan fiction of the original. That's cool and all. More power to you. I can't stomach it, especially, like, the disrespect to the original, like Kitase blatantly insulting the original game in interviews, talking about how it was weak, or talking about how he's going to make something so much better than it. People online basically do the same thing, too. It's like, oh, thank God the game is actually good now. We can't possibly play a PS1 game in this day and age. Man, the original ending that I'm too fucking stupid to understand, it sure was bad. Now we'll have a better ending. The writing will be good now, yeah? Yeah, illogical fucking time travel bullshit really spells good writing in my book. So let's talk about this game's creativity. Some of the dialogue and banter in this game is pretty good. They came up with original lines and interactions that don't break the established mold of the characters, and are sometimes even enjoyable. That's probably the best praise I can give for what actually took some degree of creativity to come up with. It's obvious that most of the efforts in this game went into the core cast. Even when they try to do stuff with the side characters like Jesse or Leslie, it comes across as way more simplistic and generic than the dialogue and the banter they make for the core cast that comes across as more natural, less forced, and less like they're trying to shove a tropey, tired, overused characterization onto a side character. Like I said, play to your strengths. Don't waste time giving a half-assed characterization scene to a side character if it doesn't serve to support the far more developed main characters or anything else that could be considered the primary strength of the narrative. This game basically introduces like a new godlike deity that apparently protects all of fate, whatever the fuck that means, in this universe. It doesn't bother to explain why fate is veering off course in the first place, which would be the inciting incidents for the ghost to take action. How the fuck is anybody able to make time go off course? Oh right, I forgot. Sephiroth fanfictions. Just like how in the original game, Sephiroth, didn't give a fuck about Cloud and only thought of him as like this insignificant ant barely worthy of notice, just a bumbling fucking idiot who thought he was hot shit. But in all the spin-off shit, the fanfiction of their eternal gay rivalry has become, the accepted dumbass fanfiction. Now Sephiroth is obsessed with Cloud for actually no given reason. Do people somehow think that Nomura understands the original game? Do people really fucking think that? Sephiroth used to have an air of complexity about him, his vague indications that questions who the true antagonist was between Sephiroth influencing Jenova and Jenova invading Sephiroth's mind and as his mental state deteriorates. But nope. The fans all want to jerk off to Sephiroth, so we need to make him the strongest, most godlike figure who's ever lived, who is immortal and always in control at all times. The only fucking possible thing I can even fathom as to why fate is being changed in the first place that would reveal the time ghosts is that Sephiroth is just so fucking cool, man. He's just like above time and space because he's such a fucking joke of a middle schooler's fanfiction right by now. He's just that goddamn powerful. He was born capable of time travel and defying destiny, yeah. But even then, that wouldn't make sense either, because some parts where fate seems to be changing don't change in ways that seem to directly benefit Sephiroth at all. So it makes no sense to assume that he's influencing reality to veer off course in these ways, even if for some stupid fucking reason that was possible. Also, am I supposed to take this shit seriously? These time ghosts, like the fucking god of fate or whatever, is a laughingstock. How are the ghosts supposed to make fate get back on track? How? They just show up as a swarm of angry ghosts to fuck with anything that changes. Still, with no explanation as to why it's changing in the first place. They don't even, like, wipe the memories of the people who see them. You'd think people seeing a bunch of fucking angry gray Death Eaters that they were never supposed to see in the original timeline of Fate would make Fate go off track on its own, right? They have literally no ability to do anything. I've never seen such a fucking joke. It's a god that protects all of Fate, but it's getting its ass kicked by a couple of idiots with guns and swords. Are you fucking kidding me? I don't think I've ever seen such an embarrassing deity. And, like, the ghosts revived Barret, right? You'd think he'd be, like, grateful, I guess, to Fate for saving him. The characters literally don't even question whether or not they want to murder the time ghosts. They just say, oh, I decide my own destiny or whatever, and they just do it. They just do it. It feels like there are scenes missing from the game. Why aren't the characters more confused by this or asking questions? Literally none of this makes sense as it stands. And all this to say, it's not at all lost on me that because this is part 1 of a series of video game releases, they are even more lazy. Because the plot of this game is basically just, here's an excuse for us to do literally anything we feel like as we keep going. As if we weren't gonna fucking do that already. We're already doing whatever the fuck we want and contradicting the original. Who gives a shit? But, this isn't a complete story with a cohesive theme or structure. This is literally just saying, hey, the next game might have a story. Hopefully by then we'll actually have come up with a story to tell you. I will not accept anyone saying, well, we don't have all the information yet because it's only the first game, so you can't say the story is bad yet. Bitch, this game was $60 I paid for this shit. Are you trying to tell me that I should just hope that the story will somehow be good once they actually write it, once the next game comes out? I bought a fucking game. Why isn't the story already good, huh? You can't write a story that's entire purpose and conclusion is soon we'll actually write the story, like a purpose and a through line to it. Maybe you'll even have a fucking point or some sort of satisfying conflict escalation. If they haven't already made anything that you can piece together to be deep or interesting or nuanced or fucking have any appeal, why the fuck would I be dumb enough to expect that the next game will be any better? What is the fucking point of this story? Tell me one goddamn reason why I should find it interesting or profound or engaging or anything. I should clarify, I actually prefer them doing this. I don't like remakes. I don't respect remakes. I don't think they're creative works of art. I think remakes are made just to turn a profit by taking advantage of gullible people who are susceptible to rose-coloring their own glasses. When I complain that FF7R isn't faithful to the original, I actually don't think that it should be in the first place. It just bothers me when people think that it's being faithful when it so obviously isn't. Or when people view it as the true FF7 when it's clearly less inspired and creative than the original. I would rather they totally mix things up and just do their own thing. Their own take on the game and the story. Their own interpretation of it, I guess you could say. I wanted them to be original, to make their own shit, so they won't end up so that they won't end up insulting the original by comparing their fucking schlock to it, and so that they might actually come up with a product that has its own fucking material value, okay? Or immaterial value. Okay, hey, we actually made this. We didn't just copy something that already exists and repackage it solely because we have the legal ownership to do so, and the intellectual property rights, we can drag it through the mud all we like. No, I'd rather they do their own story, and I'm just saying, what they have so far of their own story seems like a pile of trash. But I do prefer trying and failing to not trying at all. So I would rather they do this than keep butt-fucking the original. Nothing butters my biscuits more than hearing numbnuts talk about how the remake can improve the original game. Let's clarify something. There's no such thing as improving a story that already exists. A piece of art exists for a purpose intended by the creator or perhaps interpreted by the audience. To change a story would be to change its purpose. It isn't possible to take something and just snip this here or add this thing here and just make it suddenly be an improved version of what it was before. Let me give you a quick example of why this is. Say I took Moby Dick. Long-ass book. Most people actually probably wouldn't like it if they actually got around to reading it. They probably couldn't get through it because half of it is just talking about processing whale oil. Say the book has some typos and grammatical errors maybe. Let's say I went into like a Word document, copy and pasted the entire book script, and cut out the whale oil parts that most people find pretty boring. Let's say, it auto-finds all the typos and grammar errors, so I, fix those too. Well, to some people, I may have improved it, quote-unquote, but there's a few problems with that. One, first and foremost, I obviously don't deserve credit for doing this. What I did was insanely easy to do. The hard part of that entire process was the original author writing the book in the first place. All I did was just cut some shit out and fix some tiny errors. Not exactly praiseworthy. 2, an audience can't consume it as a new piece of media. In the same way that you'll never be able to experience the same story twice for the first time. Like, if a story has a big shocking twist, you can't read it again and be surprised by that twist again. Even if you make alterations, the experience of consuming a modified piece of content is totally different from consuming an original piece of content. You consume original content not knowing what to expect and comparing it to every piece of media you've ever consumed before. You consume modified content looking for what's been changed, already knowing what the original is, hopefully. Although it seems like a shitload of people don't actually seem to fucking remember the original FF7 very accurately. But anyways, you consume modified content through a lens of, how will this be better or worse than the original? Rather than looking for things to like from the ground up, you're only looking for the modifications themselves, not the bigger picture. Long story short, the entire way that you experience it can never be the same as the original. It can't be an improved version of the original experience because it's a totally different kind of experience. 3, by changing the story, I change its purpose. Sure, people can decide how to interpret both the original and the modified versions, so that if they choose to see both as the same thing, that's up to them, but the fact remains that they are not the same. By cutting out all that whale oil shit, I'm changing the creator's vision. I'm changing the creation itself to match some other objective. Sure, saving Eris from dying might make you feel good in a saccharine sort of way, but so you might enjoy it more if that's what you're trying to get out of the game. But that change is fundamentally going against the purpose of the original game. It's not better, it's just different. And that's okay. Different isn't a criticism. Different things should be treated as different things that have different appeals and different pros and cons. FF7 itself isn't better than FF7R because they're totally different games with different purposes. One is an original game that tells an original story with heart and passion that forges a new path for video games and what they can and can't do, and the other is a celebration of fan service. Also, if you look at what Square pumps out each year, as well as, the original content in this game, such as the Leslie shit, removing Barrett's character flaws, and putting in the dumbass time ghosts, and you think that this is a good indication that they'll write something better than the original, then you either understood the original so poorly that you think its narrative is such a train wreck, even worse than this shit, or I don't even know, man. You're probably lying to yourself in order to maintain the fanfiction appeal of the game. You're disrespecting the original by acting like it's some mess that needs improvement so that you can amp up your own sense of fandom towards these upcoming remake games. Indulging yourself in the immature fantasy of, oh, but this new thing that I'm choosing to get into will be even better, though. And convincing yourself that this is the case no matter what, because the fantasy that this remake is some earth-shattering masterpiece is, in and of itself, the game's primary appeal. It gives people the opportunity to fantasize and to tell themselves that they're such a massive fan of the original because it feels nice to tell yourself that you're that in love with something. But enough of the armchair Redditor psychology bullshit. You can like what you like, it's all cool. It's nice that people are able to have this much fun with the game, even if it's through indulging in thought processes that I would never bring myself to indulge in. Anything that makes people happy is good for those people. It's just jaded assholes like me that can't have fun with this kind of shit. But it's also not like I'm some victim, unable to find anything that caters to my personal taste anymore. So let's move on. As soon as I wrap up what I hated this year, I can talk about what did make me happy. Okay, Yakuza 7, and why it's disappointing. Yakuza 7 is another game that probably shouldn't be on here. I actually liked a fair amount of things in this game, but this was one of the games that made me the most miserable whilst playing it this year, so we're gonna talk about it. Yakuza 7 is a game that I would still love if I never actually got around to playing it. Now, I'm fine with this as a rough first entry to this, new style of gameplay. Ichiban is extremely likable, one of the best himbo protagonists I've seen in a while, probably my favorite character from anything that came out this year. Maybe, we'll get to that. I like his concept, the general thrust of his story, once you tear away all the actual events of the story. And the one thing that I appreciated more by actually playing the game is the fact that Ichiban never once pities himself or the situation that he's in. The antagonists are usually the ones who take pity on him or treat him as someone worthy of pity, someone dealt a shit hand, and I like that a lot. That's pretty much the only thing that I liked more upon playing the game. Okay, so where does it go wrong? It's honestly not that complicated, no big secrets here. The gameplay sucks, and the game is way too long. I played this for 65 hours. Some of it was probably my fault. I grinded for levels on jobs I wasn't going to use in order to get the permanent stat increases and the additional abilities from each job, because, why the fuck else is the job system even in the game if not to, have you do that? But in fact, that's actually the wrong way to play. You're better off just spending all of your time leveling up just the single jobs that you're going to be using for the entire game, and almost entirely ignoring all of the other jobs. It's really unintuitive. Lots of things are so poorly balanced that they're put in the game for seemingly no reason, just to tempt you, I guess. The stat increases that you get from leveling up jobs are so much more significant than literally any other factor in the entire game, including your actual level and equipment, that the game is actively punishing you for using its own fucking built-in progression systems and wasting your time doing anything with any other job class. And it doesn't stop there, okay? This game is what I would describe as anti-strategy. The best option in every situation in the game is to just pick a big old attack move and do it. The only strategy, per se, comes from just realizing that poison is really fucking overpowered because it does stupid damage to bosses and is one of the only things that actually works on a lot of bosses. the game actively puts in strategic elements that are so poorly balanced they only act as a distraction. They actually hurt you to use them because they waste your turns. There were moments where I would say debuff a boss's accuracy and buff a character's evasion for like 4 turns straight, and the boss that I'm constantly debuffing the accuracy of never missed a single attack in like the 20 moves that he did in a row. Every seemingly strategic option that is available is just there to trick you to get you to waste a turn that would have been better spent just doing a fucking brain-dead attack. Why does Psycho's attack debuff have a chance of missing enemies? What fucking RPG has debuffs, not status effects, debuffs that you can just do and then nothing happens? You just wasted a turn. Don't answer that. I'm sure they exist, but it's really annoying in this game. So much of the game is determined by pure RNG. Where the characters and enemies stand in a fight? RNG. A party member might wander over to a place where he's surrounded by goons and can't do a normal attack without getting blocked. Like enemies can block you even if they're behind you. The collision on whether or not an enemy interrupts you if you try to go for a normal attack is really, really, poorly made. But enemies can just disperse. Even when you say activate a move to hit like multiple enemies all bunched up together, as soon as you hit the button to activate the move, the enemies can just start walking away, as they can just break their formation and your attack only ends up hitting one of them. Fucking awesome. I love having no influence over anything in the game. RNG also determines status effects and debuffs and shit like that, but more importantly, it determines what attacks and moves an enemy will do. Take like the Saejima boss, Majima and Saejima boss fight, for example. Saejima can choose to do a regular attack, which deals like 1/3 of a party member's total HP, or he can do a tackle, which deals 4 times that damage and instant kills you even if you perfect block, and you're at pretty around the appropriate level for the fight. As far as I can tell, what determines whether or not he does the attack or does the shoulder tackle is just RNG. One time I got to that part, I had to do that fight 3 times because I was under-leveled and just came back. But one time I got to that part of the fight and Saejima and Majima got, turns nearby one another, and they both just decided to attack Ichiban with their respective strongest attacks, and Ichiban died from full health. Sick. Fucking awesome, okay? Another time, my party members were getting wiped because literally every turn he got, Saejima would do the shoulder tackle and instant kill someone, regardless of what I did, even if I perfect blocked it. Then, after a while of constantly reviving over and over and them just getting killed as soon as I revived them and not being allowed to do anything but keep reviving, Saejima just randomly decided to do a few regular attacks in a row instead of shoulder tackles, and he didn't instant kill them, and I was able to come back and actually fucking play and beat the boss. The game is clunky as hell. Sometimes your characters will just not land their attacks. Not as in they gotta miss through the RNG built into the game, as in like the geometry of the area they're fighting in and the hitbox is fucked up. Like, okay, for example, an enemy will only be killed by the very last hit of a regular attack string. So if I say did Ichiban's normal attack to kill an enemy that had no health left, Ichiban might say pick up a nearby box, swing it twice, or swing it, he would hit for the first 2 hits, but then the hitbox would fuck up and fail, and the last hit of his attack string wouldn't connect, and the enemy would survive because he can only actually be killed by the last hit. It's kind of like Kingdom Hearts in that sense. Other than all that shit and more, the game is just a boring slog. It's not complex, it has little to no strategic depth. It's impossible for me to not get bored as I kept playing. I wound up farming a little too early because I wanted to obtain things when I unlocked them because I felt like it was the right thing to do. I started unlocking like moves for the job classes and such. But then when I entered Sotenbori, that was immediately after grinding for like slogging for 4 or 5 hours straight, doing the tedious fucking boring ass business minigame to unlock and max out Eri and her abilities. So I was already sick of grinding by that point, but then the game just expected me to grind some more to be strong enough for the Majima fight. And then, because my main jobs were underleveled, it forced me to grind even more to be able to fucking fight Kiryu. I was dead inside by the time I got to the actual ending. I spent over half an hour fighting Tendo the first time, and then I had to fucking do it again, because after over 40 minutes had passed, Tendo just seemingly randomly, with no actual explanation as, like, if I did something wrong or something, he just arbitrarily decided to do an instant kill on Ichiban. That's where the suffering came from, but honestly, the game's story, while not the worst in the series, is really nothing special. If you ignore how likable Ichiban is, the story is very basic, very uninteresting. It's just generic, bare bones. It's also very loose and scattered. The plot is all over the place and constantly loses focus. It has some really bad instances of that Nagoshi bad writing habit again. Like, he will take something good and go out of its way to make it shit. I really liked Nanba at first, for example, because I appreciated having an outlier character who had no personal stake in the narrative. You know, who was this down on his luck guy who was swept up by Ichiban's bravado and overcame his character flaws of, like, crippling cowardice and pervasive laziness just enough to improve his life a little bit. Nanba's character made perfect sense. He was clearly written to be this character. But then Nagoshi changed his mind. Nagoshi frequently, in this entire series, just fucking changes his mind. Like, he's obsessed with the shitty kinds of twists, like Game of Thrones Season 8 kind of stuff. Twists for the sake of twists. He says he wants things to be unpredictable, but he doesn't realize that he's so tempted by the siren song of a big stupid twist that his twist actually end up becoming more predictable. So, throw out all of the characterization we had for Nanba into the trash can. We are now retroactively changing his character to make him a boring fucking generic dude with a boring generic mission to save his brother, who isn't actually a character, by the way, because he only exists as a plot device, for Nanba to be this insanely tired and generic, I betrayed the group, but he still calls me friend, Nakama? How could this be? Fucking vomit-inducing drivel. They took a character that was unique for the series, an original for the series, and changed him to be a fucking boring generic character that's just copy and pasted from a dozen other characters in the series, or just stories in general. Nagoshi can't just fucking let something be the way it is, right? If there's a character that hasn't been explicitly tied into other parts of the story, he'll tie them in, even if he clearly wasn't planning on doing so from the start. Like, I'm honestly shocked that Kume didn't end up being some blood relative to, some important character, just to tie that character into the story in a more arbitrary, dumbass, shocking twist of fate kind of way. Other than that, most of the story is just pretty generic or complete nonsense. Once again, a story with a shitload of plot holes to anyone who actually bothers to use their brains while consuming media anymore. Okay, let's start with that. Lao Ma's plan was to kill some random fucking guy who paid dues to the Seiryu clan, and despite not leaving any evidence and making it look like a suicide, they just hoped that someone would magically know it was them and come take revenge. The only reason our heroes had any lead at all is because Psycho just randomly happened to be on the phone with him at the time, which Lao Ma couldn't have fucking planned for, and even if he did, that would also make no sense. Why would he expect Psycho to be able to do anything about the murder? So the plan makes no sense from the start. The reason behind it also makes no sense. Lao Ma wants a valid excuse to rile up his boys to go to war, so he wants Seiryu to overstep their boundaries. Is Lao Ma himself not overstepping his boundaries by killing this guy in Seiryu territory? I guess the rest of his clan doesn't know that he did that, but other than his own personal guys. But that begs the question. If he was keeping it a secret that he killed the guy, once again, why the fuck would he expect anyone to come after him for revenge? He left no reason to suspect it was him, other than a circumstantial phone call to Psycho he couldn't have planned for. B. Ichiban and crew clearly aren't Seiryu clan, and all Lao Ma had to rile up the rest of the Liumang was one video of Ichiban saying it was revenge for the soapland owner. Another question. If he's trying to hide the fact that he killed the soapland owner from the rest of the Liumang so that they wouldn't see that he had crossed into Seiryu turf first, why would he so clearly record a guy saying, hey, didn't you kill the fucking soapland guy? Well, whatever, okay. But anyways, If they just need one video of a dude saying that shit, why not just hire some fucking actors to play the role if it doesn't actually need to be Seiryu members? It's not like they had video of Ichiban crossing into their turf. They just have Lao Ma's word that Ichiban crossed into their turf. Sure, they could like photograph the damage that happened to their warehouse, but they did all that damage to their own warehouse. One of their own guys drove a truck into their own warehouse, so they clearly went out of their way to do that as well. They made all the evidence themselves. They literally didn't need Ichiban for any of this shit. They really could have just done this half-ass garbage whenever the fuck they felt like it. After that, they just murder 2 boys in the street. So it really doesn't matter if they have proof or not. They could have just done that from the start, and the Seiryu would have taken revenge. There'd be war. Easy. That's basically how it ends up happening anyways. All of this other shit was totally unnecessary. Especially since the Liumang all seem to trust Lao Ma, okay? He could have just shot those 2 kids and skip everything else he did. It really didn't matter if you bother to think about it. And then fucking Zhao asks you to go find proof, even though he is actually himself in a secret deal with the Koreans and could just ask them himself in private and learn the truth, even though the Koreans fucking say that they're the ones who tried to mediate the other 2 factions using information, but they're seemingly sitting on their thumbs not doing jack shit to stop this conflict from escalating. Why didn't they just deliver the info themselves if they want peace? Why didn't they stop this shit before it got to this point? They knew Lao Ma killed the Soapland guy the whole time. And then, the dumbest fucking thing in the entire game happens. Hands down. The Gomi Jewel just invite Ichiban and crew up into their lair. For seemingly no reason. I don't think they actually give a reason at any point. Even a bad, like, shitty throwaway excuse reason. The super careful, ultra all-knowing fucking information broker Gomi Jewel just tell all of their secrets to Nanba and Ichiban. Why? Obviously, they didn't expect Nanba to escape alive, but, like, why fucking bring them in the first place? Like, tell them trade secrets that they didn't need to know, and the Gomi Jewel had no fucking reason to share, and then it's all over. That's literally the inciting incident of the rest of the entire conflict, is because the Koreans just gave away their most important secret by choice for literally no reason. Nanba takes that information to the Omi march on Gomi Jewel has to abandon their home and trade, and then the Omi just march on Yokohama, okay? Let's talk about that. Okay, the Omi massively outweigh the Yokohama crime syndicate. I really don't see any even remotely possible fucking reason why the Omi couldn't have just marched on Yokohama at any previous time that they felt like. You know, is it because of the fake war between the Seiryu and Liumang that their forces are weakened, I guess? Is that why they're doing it now as opposed to any other point in time? It's really not clear. They sort of just tell you the story forwards and then don't bother explaining why anything happened, why anything that happened was actually necessary. They just expect you to not think about it and think, welp, here we are. So obviously everything in the story has led us to this point, right? But something that's somehow even more idiotic, as this was apparently the Omi's plan. No. No. That makes no fucking sense. Starting a war between Seiryu and Liumang, assuming it's even necessary for that to happen for the Omi to take over, which it probably isn't. The Omi could probably just march and they'd win. They'd easily win the fight. But anyways, starting a war is incredibly easy to do. The young recruits that don't actually know the standoff is fake still hate each other. It clearly wouldn't be hard to just invoke a war. I mean, the captain of the Seiryu clan told Ichiban that no matter what, even if Lao Ma was at fault for everything, that they were trying to start a war. Well, 2 kids were already dead, so obviously they're going to fucking war. It was that easy. None of this shit was necessary at all. But no, the Omi's plan was to start a war, like start a big conflict. The reason given is not because it would weaken the wall or whatever, but because, and they literally say this fucking dumb shit, okay, they say that apparently their plan was for the chaos of the conflict to reveal some kind of weakness or hidden secret that they could exploit. So, they didn't even know about the money laundering at all. They just thought, that there was some unknown secret, and they just decided to make a war happen, just hoping that making shit go down would randomly happen to reveal some secret they didn't know anything about. Literally, this is what we're expected to believe. This is like the rationale that's given by the character behind all of this shit and why they did it, okay? They didn't even send in their own guys to start sniffing around and investigating. No. Ichiban and his crew of misfits that just randomly happen to be involved in this conflict too, they randomly happen to learn the secret, again, because the Koreans just told them for no reason, and this rogue group of people that have no affiliation with anyone brought the secret to the Omi. I feel like in Yakuza games, if you're like a villain, if you're a bad guy, you don't actually have to think about what you're doing or make a logical plan. You don't have to come up with ideas that make sense. No. That's not how you work in this universe. All you have to do is just do vaguely evil shit, like kill people, and the more vaguely evil shit you do, the universe will just make the plot progress in such a way that it works out well for you, and then you just take credit for it as if it was your plan all along. The rest of the story is more or less fine, mostly generic shit you've seen sextillions of times before. A lot of the characters are surprisingly underwritten. For as long as the game is, the party members all have these really awful side stories in the bar that are basically exactly the same. You know, like, insert generic tragic figure from past that is motivating character because of pre-established relationship. Really generic plotline ensues. Relieve that worked out good. They're all boring. Calling them generic is being too generous. Like, the word generic needs an Ultra Instinct version of itself, an additional truer form to have the impact necessary to properly convey this level of uninterestingness and having seen this shit before and being simplistic and tired and passable as fuck. Beyond those shitty, nearly identical side stories that are so half-assed, most of the characters don't get that much in the way of, like, dramatic stakes in the plot or anything. Some characters have, like, established stakes in the plot that are also underdeveloped, but they don't really come into play that much. Nanba does. Nanba's more relevant in the actual main story, but like I said, that's a bad thing. That ruins his fucking character and retroactively makes him make no sense as a person. The only characters that come out of this game pretty well, I think, are Ichiban and Saiko. I really think that Yakuza needs new core writers at this point. Everything just feels so samey. Like, the side quests feel identical in tone and even comedic elements to side stories from most of the previous games. The plot is just a bunch of convoluted nonsense of big dumb criminal plans that aren't thought out enough or planned thoroughly enough to make them engaging or even ensure they actually make even any fucking sense. Almost nothing in the game's narrative feels authentic due to how much of the same sort of shit has come out of so many Yakuza games that came before this. It feels formulaic. That's the best word I can use to describe this game. It feels very formulaic if you've played a lot of the Yakuza games. I actually got lightheaded from frustration at the unoriginality of the writing when, say, like, a character would suddenly start telling you a generic sad backstory that sounds like every other fucking generic sad backstory for every other fucking character in every other fucking Yakuza game. Like, I was rolling my eyes hard when we got to the Captain Sawashiro scene, and then, like, after they beat him, this character, and he's just like, okay, you have beaten me now, it is time for me to start telling you my backstory. And then it just plays out like the same shit you've seen in every fucking Yakuza game. I'm actually baffled at how good Yakuza 0 is in comparison to how much they've just gone further and further downhill since. But I digress. The game isn't that bad, even if it's painfully boring to me by the end. It has some cool shit in it. The humor is funny for a bit, but I keep forgetting about that fact because it didn't maintain its humor throughout. You know, it's more of humor coming from the absurdity of certain situations, but once you get used to all of those things, there's not much left. I don't remember anything that I felt was funny in the last 15 hours of playing. Ichiban is great. I can't overstate how welcome his inclusion is into the series. The most fun I had with playing the game was playing Virtua Fighter 5 for like 4 hours straight and beating ranked matches in Shogi. When I think of, say, Ichiban's character in a vacuum, I'm really into it. And the game has, fucking banger after banger on the soundtrack. Kind of. I actually really hated the Majima theme because it was so corny and obnoxious over the top of what was not a fun boss to fight. I actually got so sick of it that I had to take off my headphones until I finished the boss. But anyways, I was really disappointed by a lot in this game, and it was not a fun time by the end. It's in this weird position where everything that I like about the game is something that I already liked long before I played it. I was already way into Ichiban and the basic premise of his story, okay? The only thing I guess I enjoyed because I actually played the game was I came away liking Psycho a lot more than I assumed I would after initially being really underwhelmed by the party members' character designs in the first couple trailers. I don't know how to feel about that. It's incredibly odd to have a game that has elements that I really love purely from extrapolating from the promotional material and promotional information, but the game itself hardly adds anything else of value to me. That is so fucking weird. Alrighty, last one, last bad thing, last disappointment bad thing, Nioh 2. I'm going to keep this brief, because I really didn't play a whole lot of this game. Just a couple of hours. I think just 3 hours I have on this game. It's on this list because it is absolutely identical to Nioh 1. I was hoping they'd improve some of the pervasive game design flaws that I've talked about in previous, videos, but no. It's amazing to me how much Nioh 2 turned me off immediately. I honestly don't think the experience could be replicated. It's impeccable. I played Nioh 1, and I had a lot of criticisms of it, but I kind of enjoyed it slightly, not enough to say that I was having fun, really, and it bothered me quite a lot of the time. Longer term, I beat the game, and I was really bored of it by the end, okay? This is due to many factors of the bad game design, including the fact that zones are mostly laid out in such a way that each combat encounter is just like fighting one guy over and over. It's insane how much of Nioh is just fighting a single one of the same fucking enemy type for the 100th time. The game started really boring me when I changed my views on its design. I was originally viewing it like a Souls-like, but it's not a Souls-like. Its design and balance is more akin to an action RPG. In Nioh, your stats and gear are major factors. Some of the enemies have broken, unfair tools and situations, and you have broken, unfair tools at your disposal too. When I was treating it like a Souls-like, I wanted to overcome challenges through grit alone. Who cares what my stats are? And I don't need any of this magic or ninja bullshit, I'm not gonna rely on any crutch, any optional tool. I'll just grind it out with my weapons, and that's all. But the game is pretty frustrating like that. It's not well designed if it's supposed to be a Souls-like. Stats actually do matter in this game, unlike in Souls, okay? You won't be able to go into every fight and come out unscathed, not taking a single hit like you can do in Souls. Like, you can play Dark Souls, Bloodborne, whatever, played at level 1, beat everything. No problem, okay? You need to have the stats to fight the stronger enemies in Nioh. So eventually, I started looking at it as the action RPG that it realistically is, and I immediately enjoyed it more. I started using all the tools. I started abusing my broken, overpowered tools like Caltrops and the Slow Spell that I had previously been ignoring and choosing to not use, and then the game became laughably easy when I started doing that. And other than the bosses, it was really striking to me that most of the game is just fighting the same fucking enemy over and over. So even though I lost my frustration with the game and enjoyed it more for a tiny little period of time, it almost instantly started plummeting down the boredom chute. Like, holy shit, was I bored of playing it after a few more hours. I could barely bring myself to finish it. So I come into Nioh 2 hoping for something a little bit improved, and holy fucking shit, I have never, and I mean this all sincerity, absolutely never gotten this bored of something this quickly. Nioh 2 is insanely similar to Nioh 1. You go around fighting mostly the same enemy types, one at a time, the same plundering of levels, even new enemies, you more or less just approach them in the exact same way. I can't overstate how much of it felt exactly the same. Just in-game feel. There's actually quite a few enemy types from what I remember. I only played like 3 hours, but even though it was a new game with new levels, new bosses, and new weapon types and new bullshit, okay, playing every second of it, I don't even know why, really. The game carried every ounce of boredom that I had by the end of the first game, and more. I'm honestly kind of shocked that the new enemies and levels and weapon types and such didn't at least keep me engaged, because I wasn't looking to shit on the game. I was hoping for some improvement. But I cannot deny the intensive boredom I definitely felt almost immediately after starting to play Nioh 2. It is absolutely uncanny. Yeah. These games are also just pretty mediocre overall in their design, and my attitude towards them is not helped by the community surrounding them. Alrighty, sick. Those are my things that bothered me this year. Now, what did I actually like? Well, not a whole lot, if I'm being honest. I guess I'll get the obvious out of the way now. Yes, on my top 5, I liked Last of Us 2. If you didn't watch my 7-hour video on why that is, and you're confused as to my appreciation of it, I can only tell you that it's inaccurate to assume that I experienced the same game as you did. So yeah, I'll just get this out of the way. Yes, I know how it sounds. The average Joe, listening to me bitch about all these pretty popular games, and then me coming out with this shit. Obviously, opinions are opinions, especially when mired by personal taste. Some games just exist outside of what people enjoy or are otherwise comfortable with, and that's totally fine. Opinions will be opinions. However, opinions are backed up by, competence with logical reasoning, how much someone knows about the topic that they're discussing, and how much thought and deliberation they put into their opinions. In this case, I've worked pretty hard to know a hell of a lot more about The Last of Us and Last of Us 2 than most people. I thought about the content of the game and my opinions on it for a long-ass time, much longer than any of you listening. I'm absolutely certain of that. And, yeah, I mean, unlike most people on the internet who just, watch a few movies and play a few games and then come up with their 2-second opinions on them and assume that they're somehow smarter than any other idiot online because of that, I'd like to think that I know what I'm talking about a little bit better than that. Obviously, one opinion can't be more right than another, but come on. I mean, I'd choose to trust the person who puts an outrageous amount of time and effort into knowing what the fuck he's actually talking about than someone else. I scoured the internet looking for people that had put as much thought into my opinion on this game as I did. I never found a single soul that actually related to my experience with it. As with most games, you have to know what to like about it, and most people don't know what to like, so they don't like it. I think most people who hate it are morons. I think most people who like it are morons. I think the Game Awards people and the official outlets that reviewed the game and voted for it are probably morons. It was shitty logic and shitty reasoning behind their shitty positions. Makes you feel like Ellie? Powerful emotional journey? Get the fuck out of here, okay? Literally no one I've found likes it for the same reasons that I have. I have seen every argument. I mean, every argument and every counter-argument for every position anyone has had on the game and thought about each one thoroughly. So believe me when I say it is extremely unlikely that you know something that I don't on this matter. I'd ask that you refrain from harassing or bothering me if you haven't watched my 7-hour-long video explaining what my thought process is in the game and why I find it what I find appealing and unappealing about it. If you just disagree and want to express that, there's a extremely high chance that whatever you have to say is something I've already heard, already considered, already come to a more nuanced conclusion than. I'm really sick of people who like to act like they can argue against my position without even knowing what my position or my arguments are. I've found that a lot, and it's very baffling. Once again, 99.9% certain that if you watch my long-ass review, you'll learn something new that you didn't know before. I don't mean to come off as aggressive. I'd actually love it if more people bothered to listen to my fucking video. I worked quite hard on that. It has a massive script. And I'm just kind of frustrated. by the fact that I actually have reasoning that, in my experience on the internet, personally, I think a lot of people would actually find compelling if they took the time to listen to it, instead of just assuming that they know everything already and have nothing left to learn. At this point, the only people that still bitch and moan about the fact that I like this game are exclusively people who are too lazy and arrogant to actually bother to listen to anyone other than themselves. No one has heard all of my arguments in person and still told me that I'm wrong. Not a soul. It's just most people don't bother entertaining the idea that they don't know everything already. That's not like an invitation if you watch my review. I'd like to do so because you want to learn something or engaged in like a fair and balanced dialogue, not just because you want to fucking tell yourself that you're right and I'm wrong the whole way through. But, yeah. Last of Us 2, that's my first one. There's nothing left for me to say. I already said everything I possibly could. It's just a matter of whether or not people bother to hear it. Okay, another favorite. I gotta say, I was really struggling to find a fifth favorite for my list because of how miserable everything was this year. There were next to no games that I actually felt anything for while playing. I'm not even talking about emotionally. I mean just basic fun. Everything was just like noise, like white noise in my brain. Either shit that got boring fast or shit that avoided getting boring fast, but still wasn't actually fun for me, like I described with Hades. Every game just felt like doing the actions on the screen that the game asked of me, and that's it. I played so many games this year, too. You know, granted, I did really like Hollow Knight, but obviously that didn't come out in 2020. The only games I still haven't gotten around to that I know of that have been praised by people are some strategy game sequels, like Crusader Kings 3 I've heard pretty good reviews from some reliable sources. Ghost Runner I haven't played yet. I never got around to seeing if Death March Club was any good or not. It didn't look very good when I glanced at it. And I haven't gotten around to Factorio yet. Most of the games weren't that bad that I played. I probably could recommend a lot of them, like Bug Fables. Spread the good word. It's way better than the new Paper Mario. But, no. I couldn't put something on this list that I didn't at least think was a worthwhile experience. And most of the things, I came out of the game thinking, some hours have passed and I didn't necessarily feel bored during that time frame. But that's all I had to feel about each game. That's not good enough, in my opinion. Half-Life Alyx, another one of my favorite games this year. This is in no particular order, by the way, except for my Game of the Year, which is a very clear favorite. No contest, in my opinion. What is there to say? You know, game is actually a game that you want to play on VR. It takes full advantage of being a VR game with the unique experience that it creates. It's thorough, it's high quality, and very engaging. The game is exciting, it's easy to get into, the whole thing is stellar top to bottom. Easy as that, not much else to say. I really don't have that much to talk about with this one. Okay, next up is Dreams. Dreams, also a VR game. Everyone always sleeps on Media Molecule games, even though they're consistently fucking phenomenal, and Dreams is no exception. It might actually be the strongest release yet, but I need to use a lot more myself to be sure. Game creation games and ease-of-use game dev engine kind of games are my jam. Have you seen the shit that people are making in Dreams? I'd have never even thought about making a VR game before Dreams came out, and now I'm, spending hours considering what unique design elements I can take advantage of to make dope-ass levels and shit, right? This should come as no surprise from a game design-obsessed autistic dude who's currently in the process of making his own fighting game in Unity. I played, Little Big Planet 2 for 2 years straight, my go-to every day. And, getting better and better with logic circuits, making dope shit, baller kush. This shit is the true entertainment. And Media Molecule always design their games so well to make it comprehensive but deep. So you can use your little logic brain and just set to work, putting your imagination into actual functional gaming. I fucking wish every day that Unity was more like a Media Molecule game. You can get so much done so quickly without sacrificing your ability to make more complex systems. It's odd that I've got 2 VR games in my top 5, but Alex and Dreams were the first games that I played on VR, dusted it off from like the cardboard box that it's been sitting in for over a year. I don't have a great VR setup, and my equipment is pretty shit, so I haven't been that prolific making shit in Dreams as I would have liked to be. But, yeah, go play Dreams, dipshits. Alrighty, I couldn't, for the life of me, find another game that I actually liked this year and felt comfortable putting on this list. It was hard to find something I thought was more deserving of praise than Hades, but I also didn't have any fun playing Hades, so I didn't feel comfortable putting that on my favorites list either. I was even considering going back and finishing Persona 5 Royal. That's how desperate I was to find something I could even say that I enjoyed my time with, and obviously that sickens me, as you could probably guess given my established disdain for remakes and other unoriginal content, especially remakes that aren't made by the original creators, and as such don't have the same quality of writing or even understanding of the fucking overarching themes, as well as the fact that Persona 5 Royal is just mechanically worse than the original, as it introduces new gameplay mechanics and new overpowered tools for the player to use without rebalancing the game around those new options to make it retain its satisfying strategic depth. But more objectively speaking, P5R probably is still pretty close to being like, P5. Obviously, they're pretty much the same game. Probably would have entertained me at some point, especially I haven't played through the new dungeons in P5R. Maybe those might have been fun. Or I might have just been so bored playing it since I played the original so much, and this is just like a flat downgrade of the original. I tried some weird shit like Death Come True. Pretty disappointing. Florence was pretty cool, very short, not particularly interesting, but cleverly presented in an engaging way that I felt was more appealing than most games that I had played this year, and it didn't overstay its welcome with it, which is nice. Blasphemous, I was somewhat into. Still felt almost nothing playing it, but I honestly had more appeal invested into that than, say, like Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I was kinda into Through the Darkest of Times, a little bit, and also, Omori. Omori came out in the last, week of the year, but it had some nifty stuff too, as did Spiritfarer. I guess as a cop-out, I could always just say Among Us or some shit, but one, Among Us didn't release in 2020, and I have never played it myself. If I wanted to just cheat, I'd say Hollow Knight, since I only got around to playing that last year, but no cheating, nope. Instead, I've decided to select Perfect Vermin as my, fifth title, not including Game of the Year. Perfect Vermin is literally 5 minutes long. But it's pretty nifty, and for that 5 minutes, I was really into it. I like the aesthetic, I like the atmosphere, it constantly feels like something fresh that you haven't already played before. The story is actually kind of disappointingly simple. I was hoping for something a little bit more abstract or bizarre, but regardless, the game is clever, and for its extremely short runtime, I was actually having fun. I don't give a shit about spoilers, but I mean, come on. The game is free, it's 5 minutes long, you don't need me to tell you what happens in it. Alrighty, last one. My game of the year for 2020, as you probably already know if you've, for some strange reason decided to follow my vapid ramblings on Twitter, I played nothing this year that was more enjoyable than Being a Dick. What the fuck is Being a Dick? I've literally never heard of that, says you. Okay, it's so indie that even on the wiki pages that I looked up for games that released in 2020, because I was trying to find a fifth game to say that I liked this year, it's not even there, despite, that very juicy, overwhelmingly positive on Steam. Being a Dick is a very, very, very not safe for work, episodic visual novel. It's kind of like a American Pie-esque, not really, that's not at all really what the tone is like, but it's college humor style kind of frat bro comedy and drama. It's crude and also witty. It's surprisingly self-aware. Believe me when I say, this, out of everything I played, had the most fresh writing I saw. It doesn't feel like a lazy copy of anything else. It's, it's very engaging to watch unfold. It's very well paced. It has a high degree of investment. I won't sit here and say that I think the characters in the plot are like this fascinatingly deep or impactful, meta-narrative, ludo-narrative bullshit. I mean, okay, comparatively speaking, it is, I would say, deeper than most of the dog shit that normal people seem to think is deep or well written this year, but that's not saying a lot at all. It's still not enough for me to call it the driving force behind the game's appeal, is what I'm trying to say. Granted, I say this with hesitation because I loved this game so much. I also went back to play Acting Lessons, which is a game made by the same writer and creator, which is already finished. Also an episodic narrative-based visual novel. I think that story, as it progresses, is actually surprisingly impactful. And yeah, it's pretty good. Some of this comes down to a topic that I've probably spoken on before. It's not that complicated. It's unrealism and immersion and, the absurdity that breeds investment. Some of the most successful stories that rely on emotional investment in characters or plot lines, especially in recent times, are tending to blend comedy and lightheartedness with, melodrama and cynicism. Like fucking, look at Danganronpa or look at Parasite that came out last year. They lower your suspension of disbelief with the sort of entertaining comedy and the excitement on that, and they capitalize on your investment in the characters and setting when it's time for the drama to turn more dark and sinister. I guess right off the bat, I should say that I get how some of you are probably reacting. 3D visual novels usually have a really uncanny valley look that's very off-putting and fucking ugly as shit. But, with some time, you get used to it, I would say. And this is definitely one of the least uncanny valley-looking 3D visual novels I've seen, other than the ones that are actually just photorealistic, like, say, Shibuya Scramble, for example. But, yeah, I mean, the thing that I found the most interesting about this game when I was trying to decide what I liked and didn't like this year, there was a very important comparison that I determined and need to make between this and Last of Us 2, which I already talked about extensively in a different video. I realized that a lot of what I actually enjoy when it comes to Last of Us 2 is in the rumination itself. I like putting it into words and explaining to people what it's actually about, what my thought process is on it, and the general public consensus surrounding it. It serves as a vehicle for a lot of discussion on writing philosophy and all that shit, and that's honestly become my biggest source of entertainment in the past many years for most media that I consume. I'm just not satisfied with the experience of consuming something anymore. I want to think about it, talk about it, have some unique observation, something to learn about, either in a good sense or a bad sense, something to say about it, and sometimes that's the point of a game or a story, like, with The Last of Us 2, half of my analysis of it is what is intended by the narrative, and half of it is making observations about the narrative quality or how it's put together. But, like, say, if I was the only human being left on Earth, and I didn't have the possibility of ever telling anyone for the rest of my life what I've thought about or realized whilst thinking on or carefully examining something like Last of Us 2, I don't think I'd actually enjoy it anywhere near as much. My enjoyment from most games now comes from having something to say about said game, rather than just enjoying the experience of it. And I think that that's what separates being a dick from most of the other stuff that I've played in recent time and makes it the clearly superior choice for this year. I never once felt compelled to stop and come up with some unique criticism, work out, the evidence for some complicated theme or anything with this game. I never even felt compelled to make a video on it back when I was playing it and loving every second of it earlier this year. It didn't even cross my mind because I didn't need to talk about it in order to enjoy it. It was just so much fun on its own merits that I had no need to try to find other ways of being entertained by it, by thinking critically about how it exists. I guess I should leave a few more specific qualities about this game. The game's dialogue is all very fresh and it flows well. The characters are, full of flavor, interesting tangents in the dialogue outside of the explicit information being conveyed. It's fucking baffling. Literally nothing had better subtext in writing this year than this fucking porn frat bro fucking parody game, and that's wild. The game starts in a very simple soap opera kind of way, but it only ever separates itself more and more from, any assumptions you might initially have about its depth or quality. In that kind of bait-and-switch sense, every character, no matter how much they might initially seem like someone you can just sum up in a few words or a few tropes, always comes across like an actual human being sooner or later. First and foremost, I'd say the primary appeal of the game is comedy, but that's not quite right. It's more than just a comedy. It's silliness mixed with drama. It's not over dramatic, but the characters are all very likable and easy to get invested in. Their conflicts and struggles are pretty down to earth and relatable without being generic and tired, so on and so forth. Obviously, this is a waifu bait game, but the guy who writes this is one of the best I've ever seen at creating fulfilling supporting cast outside of, like, just the core, waifu characters. The male supporting cast are probably the highlight of the entire game, honestly. They're usually more fun and entertaining than the core romance characters. I absolutely love the character of Derek. I'm constantly backsliding between either him or Ichiban being my favorite character from anything this year. And the game is just a blast to play. It's cute, it's hilarious, it's endearing, it has a good soundtrack. It's all mostly licensed music I've never heard of, but it's good. And it's the most actual fun I had this year. And I eagerly await the next episode. Hopefully it'll come out sometime in January. Actually, a whole bunch of shit I was previously looking forward to got delayed this year, as, you know, it did with everyone. A lot of it is slated to come out in January or early February this year, so things are looking up. Shit like Honey Pop 2, Imposter Factory, I'm really looking forward to, you know, the new Ken Reeves Gal game. The Medium might be cool, or it might suck. That at least looks like it could be somewhat creative. And at least one or two more things are escaping me at the moment. Little Nightmares 2 will be coming out pretty soon. Chris Tales isn't far off. I don't know, it won't be coming out soon, but Hollow Knight Silksong now has me, you know, chuffed and at the ready to play that. So things are looking up. Things are looking up for the near future. Those were my thoughts on the many, many, many games I played this year. I really feel like everyone around me is just going fucking insane. Like, memory is leaking from their brains and they're forgetting all of the games and movies and TV shows they've already seen in their lives and are acting like generic shit with basic plot elements, basic writing, basic character arc, basic game design elements, and basically nothing special or some sort of great, inventive masterpieces. It amazes me that people can continue to be impressed with fucking nothing. However, like I said, I also feel that, you know, that jaded cynicism was really hitting me hard this year. And now more than ever, I feel like playing games is just kind of a soulless experience where I just play the shit with the same sort of mechanics and the same sort of design elements I've already played in better games. And, you know, it just feels like Skinner boxing over and over and nothing more than that. You know, I just identify the mechanics, rationalize the most optimal way to play, and respond to given stimuli with a predetermined action based on that optimization. And for the games I didn't finish this year, or I'll buck up at some point and give them another shot, you know, or even the games that I did finish. My opinions are very fluid, and I'm always open to finding a way to enjoy something that I previously didn't like. Maybe I'll like some of these games I felt nothing but boredom from somewhere down the roads. Who knows? We'll find out in the future. 2021, here we come. Dun, 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 dun.